Chapter 38. The room wasn't big. In the corner of the room, there was a low bed covered with a straw mat and a praying mat. There was also a wooden table and a chair. Apart from that, there was nothing else. However, this was a cultivation group after all. Both the straw mat and the wooden table had a faint spiritual aura. Obviously, they weren't secular things. Once she settled down, Enchanting took out all kinds of things from her Chinquin bag. For example, bedding. Although she didn't need to rest much now, having a quilt made her feel warmer. After everything was packed, she checked the things she brought back. This Chinquin bag was the most common kind in the cultivation world, far inferior to Enchanting's. After all, her Chinquin bag was Yi Clan's collection and wasn't a common item. There weren't many things inside. There was a jade tablet, a cultivation technique manual, 2 bottles of medicinal pills, 20 spirit stones, and a jade slip called Yunwu Sek's Handbook, which recorded the sect's rules and precautions. That jade tablet was an identity tablet. She saw Yi Jinwen use it many years ago. Cultivation groups often used it to prove their disciples' identities. The jade tablet was engraved with the name, age, cultivation level, and so on. At the same time, the sect kept a copy of it for verification if a missing disciple returned. Yunwu Sek's Aura Refining Realm Cultivation Technique Manual was distributed according to the 5 elements. For example, Enchanting was registered as cultivating a wood element cultivation technique during the Immortals' Assembly, so this cultivation technique was of the wood element. However, this cultivation technique was called the Art of Longevity. It was the most common basic cultivation technique in the cultivation world. It was just a bit more complete than the one circulating in the outside world and also had some annotations from predecessors. There were also 20 spirit stones and 2 bottles of medicinal pills, which were the rewards of the Immortals' Assembly. From now on, they would be distributed like ordinary disciples every month. Enchanting was very happy with these 2 bottles of medicinal pills. With her spiritual roots, a good cultivation technique, spirit gathering pearl, and spirit gathering formation, she could only guarantee that she wouldn't fall behind ordinary cultivators with 3 spiritual roots. If she wanted to stand out among them, medicinal pills were indispensable. Today, she didn't cultivate. Instead, she had a good sleep. When she woke up early in the morning, she was full of energy. When she left the room, the small hall was quiet. There were cultivators' breaths in the other rooms, so presumably they were all cultivating. She locked the door and went out to freshen up. It was written in the booklet that this bamboo house had a small stream flowing behind it. The sect drew the water from the stream to form a pool for the disciples to wash. Turning to the back of the house, there was indeed a pool. There was no one around at the moment, so she took a handkerchief to wash up. Of course, he would forget about combing his hair. He could go back to his room and do it slowly. After washing up, Zhang Xian was just about to return to his room when he bumped into 2 people who were chatting with each other. Enchanting immediately greeted them. "Good morning, Senior Marshall Brothers." When the 2 men saw her, they greeted her and chatted while looking for a place to wash their faces. In the next moment, Enchanting had the urge to vomit, because one of them unceremoniously took off his clothes and jumped into the water. Looking at his fat body and thinking about how disgusting it was for him to use this water to wash his face and mouth, he made up his mind that next time he would definitely go upstream to collect water. When they returned to the big house, Su Jingji was chatting with Qin Shi. Qin Shi's expression was very stiff. Obviously, he wasn't interested in the topic of their conversation. Upon seeing her, Su Jingji immediately called out happily, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're so early." "Ah, good morning, Senior Marshal Brothers." Enchanting walked towards them and asked with a smile, "What are you 2 talking about?" Su Jingji said, "We were just talking about going to eat and taking a stroll around the school to understand a bit more." "Oh, I see." Although Su Jingji was overflowing with interest, Qin Shi, who was beside him, obviously wasn't interested. He just didn't refuse to give Su Jingji face. After all, cultivators didn't like to be involved in worldly affairs. Although they couldn't abstain from eating, they generally preferred to eat fasting pills. Enchanting thought for a moment, then said with a smile, "I'll go with you. I'm really a bit hungry." Su Jingji was very happy. At that moment, the door of another room opened. Lu Yidao came out and looked at them. Junior Marshall Brothers, what are you talking about? Oh, Senior Marshall Brother Lu, we're talking about going to the dining hall to eat something and take a stroll. Lu Yidao pondered for a moment, then said, You don't mind if I go with you, right? Su Jingji waved his hand repeatedly. Of course not. Senior Marshall Brother Lu can't wait to go. Lu Yidao laughed. Since the four of us are going, we might as well call Junior Marshall Brother Jiang. Su Jingji naturally didn't have any objections. Mo Tinga also didn't care. It was naturally good for her to have a good relationship with the Senior Marshall brothers who lived with her. She still had a wooden expression on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Lu Yidao knocked on Jiang Shanghong's door. Junior Marshall Brother Jiang. A moment later, the door opened. Jiang Shanghong pulled the bolt and looked at Lu Yidao standing at the door. His tone was indifferent, but it still carried a hint of coldness. Senior Marshall Brother Lu, what's the matter? Lu Yidao said with a smile. Junior Marshall Brother Jiang, we've decided to go to the dining hall to eat something and then take a stroll. Do you want to go together? Jiang Shanghong frowned. I'm not going. Lu Yidao was stunned. He didn't expect this person to be so cold, as if he didn't want to get close to them. He didn't insist and said with a smile, Junior Marshall Brother Jiang, please help yourself. We'll be leaving first. Jiang Shanghong uttered an "in," then closed the door in Lu Yidao's face. Lu Yidao didn't mind. He turned around and called out to the others. Let's go. Mo Tinga and Su Jingji glanced at each other, then shook their heads and followed Lu Yidao out. After walking for a short distance, Su Jingji secretly said to her, This Senior Marshall Brother Jiang is also from a cultivation clan of Yunwu's sect. I heard he was abandoned by his clan and gave the opportunity to enter the sect to his cousin. He wasn't willing to accept this, so he was willing to risk his life to participate in the Immortals' assembly. Oh, Mo Tinga finally understood. Presumably, this person's heart was filled with ambition, so he simply didn't want to spend his time on anything other than cultivation. Junior Marshall Brother Jiang's cultivation level is already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm before he's 30 years old. It's already very rare, but their clan actually gave up on such a disciple. Lu Yidao, who had heard their conversation, also came over. Su Jingji was also a member of a cultivation clan, so he knew a lot about this situation. He said, Senior Marshall Brother Lu doesn't know, but their Jiang clan is also one of the best cultivation clans in Yunwu's sect. They have 2 core formation cultivators and dozens of foundation building cultivators. They don't care about disciples with 3 spiritual roots or below. This Senior Marshall Brother Jiang originally had an elder who, because of a power struggle within the clan, offended the current clan head. That elder has long passed away, so Senior Marshall Brother Jiang has to take his anger out on everyone. Aside from Su Jingji, everyone present was an individual cultivator. They couldn't imagine the power struggle within a cultivation clan, so they could only shake their heads. Lu Yidao sighed and said, Although this Junior Marshall Brother Jiang's spiritual roots aren't too good, he's very hard-working in his cultivation. If he had the clan's support, presumably, he would have been able to build his foundation. What a pity. Su Jingji also shook his head. According to their Jiang clan's power, they can recommend several disciples to enter the sect every year. In fact, if it was someone else, they wouldn't need to cultivate to the 10th layer to directly enter the sect. They basically wouldn't need to participate in the Immortals' assembly. Unlike our Su clan, which is only a small cultivation clan with very few quotas, we have no choice but to participate in the Immortals' assembly. Several people sighed inwardly. Being an individual cultivator wasn't easy, and cultivation clans weren't always smooth sailing either. Both had their own difficulties. In conclusion, there was only one reason. The path to immortality was difficult. Chapter 39. Following the map in the brochure, they arrived at the dining hall. Someone immediately came to greet them. Senior Marshall Brothers, are you here to eat? Please take a seat. If you want food delivered in the future, just let me know. Mo Tinga saw that this person was quite old and only had a cultivation level in the first layer of the aura refining realm. Presumably, he was a descendant of a cultivation clan with poor spiritual roots and could only do odd jobs here to make a living. Among them, Su Jingji was the most familiar, so he said, "Let's eat what we're supposed to eat." The man grunted in acknowledgement and retreated. Not long after, a mortal woman brought food over. Clearly, it had been prepared in advance. Mo Tinga glanced at the dishes. Stir-fried mustard greens, pickled cucumbers, steamed spare ribs, stir-fried rabbit meat, and a bowl of fish soup. All of them had a faint spiritual aura. Apparently, the food in Yunwu's sect wasn't bad. Mo Tinga and Su Jingji picked up the bowls and chopsticks, but seeing that the other two people didn't move, Su Jingji said, "Senior Marshal Brothers, you don't have to worry. In fact, eating food with spiritual aura isn't a problem. After a while, you just need to treat it as a medicinal pill to dissolve it. It won't affect your cultivation." Lu Yidao hesitated. "Really?" Mo Tinga smiled. "Yes. Otherwise, why would the group set up a dining hall? Wouldn't it be better to just give the disciples fasting pills?" Lu Yidao asked again. "Isn't it because fasting pills are troublesome to concoct?" Mo Tinga and Su Jingji were both dumbfounded. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. Qin Shi, who had been silent the whole time, finally said, "The group encourages people to eat fasting pills. That way, they won't have to worry about their appetites, and it's helpful for cultivation. However, eating food with spiritual aura isn't a problem. If it's from spiritual beasts, it can also increase your spiritual aura, so there's no harm in eating it." Mo Tinga and Su Jingji nodded repeatedly. "I see." Lu Yidao picked up his chopsticks, and the four of them started eating. Most of the time, it was Mo Tinga and Su Jingji eating. The two of them only tasted a few mouthfuls. It was clear that the two of them had firm Dao hearts and didn't care about the desire for good food. After randomly eating some food, Mo Tinga and Su Jingji ordered the servants to deliver food every day and didn't have to spend time coming here anymore. Originally, all the disciples in the sect were like this. No one was willing to spend time on the road every day. Every day, they would just ask someone to deliver food. After leaving the dining hall, the four of them strolled around Mount Yunwu, with Su Jingji leading the way. After familiarizing themselves with the terrain, they went back together. By now, Mo Tinga had more or less memorized the terrain of this mountain. Mount Yunwu had two peaks, the north and the south. Newcomers like them were all assigned to the south peak. The south peak was shorter, and the spirit chi there was also less. The mountain gate was directly connected to the market square, so it was very convenient for low-level disciples to stay here. The north peak, on the other hand, was a lot taller, and the spiritual aura there was also several times better. Apparently, only those who had built their foundation could move to the north peak. For aura-refining disciples like them, they couldn't go to the north peak without a task. On the southern peak, there was the True Treasure Hall, the Deacon's Hall, and the Tao Propagation Palace. The real treasure hall was where the sect leader handled matters. However, the sect leader was usually on the north peak, and the disciples on the south peak were all managed by the Deacon's Hall. The Deacon's Hall managed all the affairs of the aura-refining disciples, such as assigning tasks, distributing spirit stones and medicinal pills, arranging accommodation, handling disputes, and so on. The Tao Propagation Palace, on the other hand, was a place for preaching Tao. Every 10 days, a foundation-building cultivator would preach there, and occasionally, core formation cultivators would come. This was the most popular event for aura-refining disciples. As for the errands, they were usually done by the odd-job disciples. So-called part-time disciples were different from formal disciples like them. Every 10 years, when a mountain gate was opened to recruit disciples based on their spiritual roots, some people with poor spiritual roots who failed to be selected would volunteer to become part-time disciples. Their job was to handle some chores, such as guarding the gate, running errands, cleaning, and so on. The ones who served them in the dining hall were the part-time disciples. Like them, part-time disciples were also given spirit stones according to the tasks they did. However, they didn't get medicinal pills. If a foundation building elder fancied a part-time disciple, he or she could be promoted to a formal disciple. So many people were willing to become part-time disciples. Of course, it didn't mean that formal disciples didn't have to do anything. For example, guarding the mountain gate required a formal disciple to lead them. Taking care of spiritual plants, concocting pills, and refining tools were all done by formal disciples and a few part-time disciples. However, compared to part-time disciples, formal disciples only needed to do 1 or 2 tasks every year, so they had a lot of time to cultivate. When they returned to their residence, they found an unfamiliar cultivator watering 2 spiritual plants next to the first room. When they were sent here yesterday, the 2 aura refining disciples told them that the first room was where the manager lived. The manager of their residence was Senior Marshal Brother Joe, but he wasn't here for the time being. When they saw this person, everyone's expression changed. This person's cultivation level was actually slightly higher than a 10th layer aura refining cultivator, but he hadn't reached the foundation building realm yet, so he seemed to be in the 11th layer. According to the classification of aura refining realms, the 1st to the 4th layer was the early stage of the aura refining realm, the 5th to the 7th layer was the middle stage, the 8th to the 10th layer was the late stage, and the 10th layer was the peak stage of the aura refining realm. However, there was one situation where a cultivator's cultivation level was higher than the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, but he wasn't in the foundation building realm. That was when a cultivator ate a foundation building pill, but didn't succeed in building his foundation, but completely absorbed the medicinal power of the foundation building pill, thus advancing to the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Normally, if one failed in building their foundation, their spiritual aura wouldn't increase. Once this happened, the cultivator would only need 2 foundation building pills at most to successfully build their foundation. If an 11th layer aura refining cultivator took a foundation building pill, they might be able to advance to the 12th layer, but if a 12th layer aura refining cultivator took a foundation building pill, they would definitely advance to the foundation building realm. As for ordinary disciples, the success rate of taking a foundation building pill was no more than 10 to 20%. Therefore, whenever a disciple in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm appeared, the next foundation building pill would definitely fall into their hands. In other words, they were almost all foundation building cultivators. Apparently, this person was their supervisor, Senior Marshal Brother Joe. It was no wonder that the supervisor of the female courtyard was a foundation building marshal uncle, but they were actually his senior marshal brother. It turned out that this senior marshal brother wasn't an ordinary disciple. While they were still in shock, Senior Marshal Brother Joe had already finished watering the spiritual plants. He turned around and swept a glance at them. While putting away the watering tools, he said, "You're the new disciples?" They regained their senses and hastily saluted him. "Greetings, Senior Marshal Brother Joe." Senior Marshal Brother Joe uttered an "eh," then went back to trimming the leaves. He said, "Since you're living here, you have to abide by my rules. I don't care whether you cultivate or play around, but you're not allowed to disturb other people, you're not allowed to go to places you're not allowed to go, and you're not allowed to fight. If you need to leave the mountain, you need to inform me. If you have a dispute with someone else, you also need to report to me. Of course, if you encounter any problems in your cultivation, you can also come to me. Understood?" They all answered in unison, "Yes." Senior Marshal Brother Joe waved his hand. "That's enough. You can go now." They saluted him again before returning to their small living room. Once they closed the door, Su Jingji immediately said enviously, "So this is the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. This Senior Marshal Brother Joe's luck is really good. How could Imo Tinga not think so?" With her spiritual roots, the possibility of her building her foundation was really very small. Although the 11th layer of the aura refining realm wasn't the foundation building realm, it was tantamount to having 1 foot in the door of the foundation building realm. Lu Yidao said, "Among us who entered the sect, which one of us didn't come for the foundation building pills? I just don't know if we'll be as lucky as Senior Marshal Brother Joe. If we can enter the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, then we'll have hope in building our foundation." Qin, she said, I heard there's still 3 years until the sect's internal competition. Work hard. The three of them nodded repeatedly. The internal competition would award foundation-building pills according to the ranking, so they naturally wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. However, Imo was very worried. Lu Yidao was in the 10th layer, so in the next 3 years, he only needed to practice fighting. Qin, she was in the 9th layer, so he had a high chance of entering the 10th layer. He was also good at fights of magical powers. As for Su Jingji, his cultivation level was a bit higher than hers, and he also had the backing of his clan. Only she, who was in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, could enter the sect through luck. Being able to reach the 9th layer of the aura refining realm within 3 years was already very ideal. Wanting to win a foundation-building pill was too difficult. Chapter 40. Several days later, a part-time disciple came to deliver their uniforms. Senior martial brother, Zhou, told them that a foundation-building martial uncle would give a sermon in the Tao Preaching Palace today. The uniforms of Mount Yunwu disciples were cyan with clouds and the words Yunwu Sect embroidered on the cuffs. The uniforms of aura refining disciples like them couldn't be considered good-looking. Imo Tiange recalled the clothes Yi Jingwen wore in her memory. They were really elegant and much better than Yunwu Sect's clothes. She then laughed at herself. Sure enough, a woman's nature was hard to change. She tightened her chest, wrapped her waist a few more times, and put on a robe. She looked at her flat figure in the mirror with satisfaction. She didn't look like a woman at all. For immortal cultivators, it was safer to use magic or spiritual weapons like this. However, it was getting harder and harder for her to pretend. After she turned 15, the difference between her and a man became bigger and bigger. Not only did she have to tie her chest and waist, but she also had to pretend to be a man. Fortunately, her voice wasn't sharp, so it wasn't easy to be suspicious. After confirming there were no problems, she opened the door and saw that the other 3 people were ready. As for Jiang Shanghong, he had long left on his own. That person was incompatible with them, but it didn't matter. As cultivators, they didn't care about establishing friendships and the like. The reason why the 4 of them always moved together was because Lu Yidao and Su Jingji were very cordial. Fortunately, apart from them, everyone was focused on cultivating. Otherwise, she also wanted to learn from Jiang Shanghong and ignore everything. When they arrived at the Tao Preaching Palace, everyone found a place to sit. Before long, a middle-aged Taoist with a foundation-building cultivation walked up and sat on the praying mat at the very front, facing everyone. Everyone hurriedly stood up and bowed. Greetings, martial uncle. The Taoist nodded. Disciples, please sit. There were at least several hundred people in the Tao Preaching Palace. At this moment, everyone was sitting cross-legged on the praying mats in silence. The Taoist examined them and said, My Taoist name is Qingyu. This month, I'll preach to the disciples. A few days ago, a group of new disciples entered the sect, so today, I'll talk about the meaning of Tao. Dear disciples, what is the Tao to you? Why do you cultivate? Once Taoist Qingyu finished speaking, a disciple in the front row answered, Martial uncle, Tao is the law of heaven and earth. Cultivating is for longevity. Taoist Qingyu nodded, then asked, Does any of the disciples have any objections? Another person answered, Reporting to Uncle Master, this disciple thinks that Tao is the origin and cultivation is for longevity. Taoist Qingyu nodded with a smile. You're right. Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things, and that is the origin. The sun and moon lay dormant. The 4 seasons alternated, and everything in the netherworld followed the cause. These were the laws of heaven and earth. We cultivate for the sake of longevity and also the process of pursuing the Tao. Logically speaking, life and death, withering and flourishing, were originally the Tao of heaven and earth, but immortality was jumping out of life and death. So why was it still considered to be pursuing Tao? You must know that the way of the heavens is to exist forever. What we pursue is to abandon the glory of withering away and live forever with the heavens. Therefore, Cultivating to become an immortal was both obeying and defying the heavens. All living things have their own ups and downs. If we want to jump out of all living things, then we will have to go against the heavens. As a result, when one successfully cultivates to become an immortal, there will be tribulations to overcome. This is the reason why heaven and earth do not tolerate this. However, after overcoming the tribulations and ascending to the great Tao, the heavenly Tao leaves a slim chance of survival for all living beings. We cultivate to become immortals, but we accept the test according to the way of the heavens. How to go against the heavens and reach the state of obeying the heavens is what we cultivators do. Everyone listened attentively, and Mo Tienga was even more attentive. This was the first time she heard this theory about Tao. The path of cultivation was vastly different, and everyone had their own understanding. What this martial uncle said was different from what second uncle said. The day passed in the blink of an eye. When the time came for the lecture to end, the four of them had gained some understanding. On their way back, Lu Yidao sighed and said, "It was originally a fated chance that I was able to embark on the path of cultivation. If someone had taught me like this at that time, I wouldn't have wasted my time until now." Although Lu Yidao had 4 spiritual roots, 2 of his spiritual roots were excellent, so his aptitude should have been slightly better than Mo Tienga's. Mo Tienga was confident she could reach the 10th layer of the aura refining realm before the age of 25 and attack the foundation building realm. Lu Yidao was already in his 30s, so what he said wasn't a lie. Su Jingji smiled and said, "Senior martial brother Lu is only in his early 30s, so he's quite confident he'll be able to build his foundation before the age of 40. He's much better than many people who have no hope of building their foundation for the rest of their lives." Lu Yidao also smiled and patted Su Jingji's shoulder. "Junior martial brother Su is right. I'm already very lucky." The 4 of them returned to their residence. Each of them went back to their respective rooms to cultivate and reflect on what they learned today. From then on, Mo Tienga's days became more peaceful. Every 10 days, she would go to the lecture with everyone. Once she returned to her room, she would concentrate on cultivating. Every half a month, she would go down the mountain and give the formation she and second uncle developed to the sex shop for sale. She would then use the spirit stones she got from the sale to buy medicinal pills for second uncle to treat his injuries. 3 months later, she successfully advanced to the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. In the past few months, she had a lot of medicinal pills on her. The medicinal pills left behind by the man and woman in the forest, the prizes from the Immortals Assembly, and the medicinal pills and spirit stones distributed by the sect every month. After eating all the aura-nourishing pills, she finally advanced to the 8th layer. This made Su Jingji extremely envious. He was originally in the 8th layer, but he still hadn't advanced. Qin Shi, on the other hand, had already advanced from the 9th layer to the 10th layer. Among the 5 people in this room, it could be said that he was the only one who hadn't advanced. He could only blame himself for frequently taking errands. In the past 3 months, he always went out and didn't have much time to cultivate. It would be strange if he could advance. Because of this, Su Jingji made up his mind to enter closed-door meditation. He wouldn't go out unless he listened to Tao lectures. Su Jingji was in closed-door meditation, and the other 3 were all ascetic cultivators, so Mo Tienga was happy not to have to deal with them. Every day, she cultivated, studied formations, and occasionally went out to catch some wild animals to satisfy her cravings. Her days were actually quite free and unfettered. She used the light body technique and sent out a wind blade, causing the running deer to fall. Mo Tienga flew over, picked up the deer, and threw it into her Chinquan bag. She then went back the way she came. When she reached the stream, she fished out the deer's corpse, skinned it, and cleaned it. Although the south peak of Mount Yunwu was much worse than the north peak, it was still a rare spirit vein. The small animals caught here were much more delicious than those at the foot of the mountain. She first drained the deer's blood and cleaned its internal organs before peeling off its skin. After that, she cut it into pieces, smeared most of them with salt, wrapped them with spiritual plants, and stuffed them back into her chinko bag. After that, she picked up a piece and carefully sliced it, smeared some seasoning on it, and roasted it over a fire. Fire spells were meant to be used like this. Hey, Senior Marshal's sister, there's someone roasting something here. Tinga turned around and saw two female aura refining cultivators approaching. Judging from their clothes, they were also disciples of Yunwu's sect. She had long sensed their breaths, but this was Mount Yunwu, and fellow disciples were everywhere. She crawled out of the haystack and smiled. Hello, Senior Marshal's sisters. Her sudden appearance startled the two of them. These two women seemed to be in their 20s. Their appearances were also pretty good, especially the Senior Marshal's sister. She could be considered a beauty. The younger one frowned and rebuked her when she saw Tinga's gaze. Which disciple are you in charge of? How could you be so rude? Tinga was dumbfounded. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. Tinga merely glanced at them, yet she was already regarded as a lecher. She immediately said, Senior Marshal's sister, you misunderstood me. I was just secretly looking for a place to hide and roast something to eat. I didn't expect Senior Marshal's sisters to discover me, so I was a bit worried. This reason was reasonable, so the Senior Marshal sister said, Junior Marshal brother, don't worry. We just smelled the aroma and came to take a look out of curiosity. We won't tell anyone. She wasn't afraid of telling anyone because Senior Marshal brother Zhou wouldn't care anyway. Of course, she still had a smile on her face. Thank you, Senior Marshal sisters. Meeting each other is fate. Coincidentally, my venison is also roasted. How about we eat it together? Just take it as an apology for scaring you guys just now. Seeing how polite Tinga was, the Junior Marshal sister didn't argue anymore. She smiled and said, Junior Marshal brother, are you serious? Don't tell me you're reluctant to part with it? Tinga took out a large piece of venison from her chinko bag. Senior Marshal's sister, look, I still have a lot. I can't eat it all by myself. Tinga's cooking skills weren't just for show. The venison was roasted until it was golden yellow. The aroma drifted far away, making people want to eat it. Sure enough, the Junior Marshal sister was reluctant to leave. She pulled her companion and said, Senior Marshal's sister, The Senior Marshal sister said helplessly, we don't know this Junior Marshal brother. How can we? It's not a big deal. He said he wanted to apologize to us. Yes. Tinga giggled and took over the conversation. Senior Marshal's sister, don't hesitate. Just treat it as me bribing you after you discovered me eating secretly. The Junior Marshal's sister clapped her hands happily. Her impression of Tinga improved greatly. What Junior Marshal brother said is reasonable. Senior Marshal's sister, don't be polite with him. What else could the Senior Marshal's sister say? They could only let her be. The three of them got to know each other. As it turned out, these two female cultivators were the disciples of Marshal Uncle Lin from the women's yard. Tinga learned from them that Marshal Uncle Lin's name was Lin Qingwan. She was also a well-known foundation-building cultivator in Yunwu's sect. In fact, she didn't live in the South Peak. It was just that the female disciples in the South Peak were under her management. The person who really managed them on her behalf was this Senior Marshal sister in front of them, Bing. This Junior Marshal sister was called Yen. She was Marshal Uncle Lin's youngest disciple. After chatting with them, Tinga learned that Bing was a cultivator with double spiritual roots. She was just 20 years old this year, but her cultivation level was already in the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Yin also had triple spiritual roots. She was 18 years old this year, and her cultivation level was in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Bing wasn't a big deal, but judging from Yin's temperament, she definitely wasn't a person who was willing to cultivate painstakingly. Her spiritual roots were also ordinary, but her cultivation level was actually in the 8th layer. From this, it could be seen that compared to individual cultivators, the disciples of cultivation groups were blessed by heaven. Although Tinga didn't deliberately want to make friends with them, there was no harm in having more friends in this cultivation group. After all, These two were advanced inner disciples of foundation building cultivators. Besides, she was really lonely. She couldn't reveal her identity as a woman. She had to keep a distance from male cultivators, and it wasn't easy for her to meet female cultivators. She often recalled her childhood with Tian Xiao and longed to have a friend like that. Sometimes, when she was cultivating, she would think, if she could start over, would she choose to be immortal and live a peaceful life, or would she come to the cultivation world and struggle to cultivate, struggling to walk on the road to immortality? If she was really a man, she might not hesitate. However, as a woman, she was still emotional. Chapter 41. After parting ways with her two senior marshal sisters, Tinga packed her things and prepared to go back. Today's meal was really worth it. Senior Marshal Sister Shun was very polite, so presumably she wouldn't refuse if she had any requests in the future. As for that Senior Marshal Sister Morong, she ate most of the barbecue today. After eating her food, her attitude towards Tinga couldn't be better, especially when she found out that the food was much more delicious than the food in the dining hall. She immediately said that they would roast food together again in the future. Tinga didn't refuse. She seemed to see Tianxiao's shadow in this senior martial sister Morong. Back then, Tianxiao always dragged her to do this and that. It was only when she was together with Tianxiao that she had the joy of her childhood. After walking for a while, she stopped. There were several breaths in front of her, which made her feel very strange. It seemed like they weren't friendly with each other. Could it be that there were disciples fighting here? She hesitated for a moment before finally deciding to restrain her breath and quietly approach them. Second brother, you're indeed very capable. You actually managed to enter the sect. Unfortunately, you're only an ordinary disciple. It'll be really difficult for you to seize foundation-building pills. Tinga hurriedly hid behind a big tree when she heard the voice. She peeked and saw several people standing in the open space in front of her. One of them looked a little familiar. She recognized him for a few seconds before realization dawned on her. This was Jiang Shanghong, who had never dealt with them. Several people stood in front of him. All of them looked like youths, but they looked like hooligans. In comparison, Jiang Shanghong's gloomy aura didn't make people feel so uncomfortable. Since they were quite far away, Tinga couldn't clearly see Jiang Shanghong's expression. She only heard him snort and sneer. Jiang Changxian, what does it have to do with you whether I can seize foundation-building pills or not? You'd better watch yourself. Second brother, why are you so fierce to me? Your fourth brother? This isn't the demeanor of an elder brother. I'm afraid eldest uncle will get angry if he sees you like this. His sarcastic tone made Tinga very uncomfortable. Su Jingji once said that Jiang Shanghong could have directly entered the sect, but his qualifications were replaced by his younger cousin. Could it be that this person was the one? This person's cultivation level was indeed not very high. He had already entered the sect as a substitute, yet he was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. However, there were a few people around him who were not bad. One was in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm like him, 2 were in the 8th layer, and 1 was in the 9th layer. Although none of the 5 people had a higher realm than Jiang Shanghong, ants could bite an elephant to death. Jiang Shanghong still couldn't resist them. Moreover, he had to be careful with his life. Yunwu sect rules clearly stated that no one could harm a fellow disciple's life. Otherwise, he would be with them. Tinga didn't plan to meddle. No matter how much Jiang Shanghong was bullied, he was still a member of Jiang clan. As an outsider without any foundation, wouldn't she be asking for trouble if she offended a descendant of Jiang clan who could summon wind and rain in Yunwu sect? With. Sure enough, Jiang Shanghong couldn't restrain himself after hearing these mocking words. He reached into his robe, wanting to take something. When the people on the other side saw this, they immediately drew their weapons. In the next moment, Jiang Shanghong took out a handkerchief and wiped his hands. He then cast them a contemptuous glance. I'm just wiping my hands. Why are you so nervous? Tinga almost couldn't hold back her laughter. This Jiang Shanghong was also a talented person. After being ridiculed and ridiculed, his one action made Jiang Chengxian's face turn green. This time, it was Jiang Chengxian who couldn't hold back anymore. He winked at his companions and said with a sneer, "Second brother, I heard you were very powerful in the Immortals' Assembly. I really want to learn from you." Jiang Shanghong snorted. "All of you, come at me together. Let me see if you've made any progress in the sect." This was obviously a lecturing tone. Jiang Chengxian's face darkened. Relying on the fact that he had more people on his side, the five of them took out their spirit tools and talismans. Jiang Shanghong's reaction wasn't slow. The moment they attacked, he took out a talisman and slapped it on his body. He used the light body technique to jump into the air, and his spirit tool flew out. Jiang Shanghong's spirit tool was a bell, or perhaps an enlarged bell. He shot a spiritual aura, causing the bell to make a buzzing sound. Tinga suddenly felt dizzy. When she came back to her senses, she immediately realized that this was a spirit tool with hallucinogenic effects. She immediately circulated her qi to her dantian, and sure enough, she no longer had a headache. With an unsightly expression, Jiang Chengxian shouted at his companion, "Guard your dantian. His bell will be useless." He was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, so he really wasn't Qin Shi's opponent. Therefore, he could only focus on defending against the bell's sound. The two men in the 8th and 9th layer of the aura refining realm were barely able to break free from the bell's control. They controlled their spirit tools to attack Jiang Shanghong. Jiang Shanghong had no choice but to stop ringing the bell and dodge the spirit tool's attack. Upon seeing this, Tinga shook her head. This bell was indeed a good treasure, but unfortunately, it wasn't very powerful. If her cultivation level wasn't too high, it wouldn't be a problem for her to break free from its control and break it very easily. Sure enough, Jiang Shanghong put away the bell and took out a flying sword. An aura refining cultivator's spiritual aura could only be used to control one spirit tool at a time. This was also the limit in fights of magical powers. Although this bell was very useful in fights of magical power, Jiang Shanghong had no choice but to give it up. However, his flying sword also didn't seem to be an ordinary item. Its spiritual aura was everywhere, so the three people besieging it couldn't do anything to it. Jiang Chengxian, on the other hand, was very vicious. The three people were already besieging Jiang Shanghong, but he still took out talismans and threw them almost as if he didn't care about money. Tinga didn't know what he thought of this blood-related cousin of his. He simply wanted to take his life. Tinga frowned. It wasn't that she wanted to meddle in other people's business, but she knew very well that she didn't have the qualifications to cause trouble. Besides, the other party was Jiang Clan, which controlled Yunwu's sect. However, Jiang Shanghong could be considered someone she knew in Yunwu's sect. Compared to Jiang Chengxian, she still felt he was more pleasing to the eye. Sure enough, Jiang Shanghong couldn't hold on any longer. He could still fight evenly against three opponents who were only 1 or 2 layers below him. However, there was a person next to him who kept throwing talismans at him, so it was very strenuous for him to hide. He could only choose to dodge everywhere instead of continuing to parry. Jiang Shanghong was also a ruthless person. Even though he was beaten to a sorry state, he didn't make a sound and only focused on dodging everywhere. He looked for an opportunity to fight back. Moreover, he didn't care about the people besieging him and only attacked Jiang Chengxian. When Jiang Shanghong was finally knocked down, Jiang Chengxian was also hit by one of Jiang Shanghong's spells. Seeing that Jiang Shanghong was no longer moving, Jiang Chengxian spat out a curse and kicked him twice. Jiang Shanghong, who was lying on the ground, let out a muffled groan, but he still didn't make a sound. Tinga frowned as she looked over there. Fortunately, Jiang Chengxian still had some misgivings. Seeing Jiang Shanghong lying half dead on the ground made him feel refreshed. He mocked Jiang Shanghong a few more times, then waved his hand and swaggered away with his companions. She waited for a while, but that group of people didn't come back, so she finally came out. She cautiously looked around before she finally walked towards Jiang Shanghong. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang? Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. Jiang Shanghong's face was covered in blood, and his breathing was weak. He opened his eyes to look at her, then closed them again. Mo Tinga had no choice but to cast a spell to help him up. She then used light body technique to fly towards their residence. Chapter 42. Mo Tinga stealthily carried Jiang Shanghong back, then carried him into the house and knocked on Lu Yidao's door. Senior Marshal Brother Lu? Senior Marshal Brother Lu? After a while, Lu Yidao finally opened the door. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, what's the matter? Mo Tinga pointed behind her. Lu Yidao was shocked when he saw what was behind her. Jiang Shanghong was lying on a chair, his face covered in blood and on the verge of death. Lu Yidao first checked Jiang Shanghong's injuries to confirm they weren't life-threatening. He then looked outside the house to make sure there was no one else there before asking in a low voice, "What's going on?" Mo Tinga pointed at Jiang Shanghong, then at his house. "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, let's talk inside." Lu Yidao thought for a moment, then nodded. All the doors outside were open, so it wasn't a good place to talk. At that moment, the other two doors opened. Su Jingji and Qin, she also came out. Upon seeing this scene, Su Jingji was also gobsmacked while Qin, she wrinkled his brows. Lu Yidao gestured for them to be quiet, then carried Jiang Shanghong into his house. He took out a medicinal pill and fed it to him before signaling the others to come in. After the other three people entered his room and closed the door, Lu Yidao asked, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, what's going on?" Mo Tinga told him what happened, then said, "From what I saw, Jiang Changxian didn't seem to be afraid Senior Marshal Brother Jiang would reveal this matter, so he didn't dare to make it public and secretly brought him back." Su Jingji interrupted. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi did the right thing. Among the two core formation grandmasters of Jiang clan, one of them is Jiang Changxian's direct elder. Because of that, Jiang Changxian has an elder protecting him, so he's completely lawless. Since he dared to beat Senior Marshal Brother Jiang like this, others definitely won't dare to do anything to him. If people find out it was Junior Marshal Brother Yi who brought him back, they might even implicate him." They weren't as good as Su Jingji when it came to matters related to clans and sects, so they didn't object. Mo Tinga said with a bitter expression, "I just thought Senior Marshal Brother Jiang would have most likely been injured even if he survived being thrown there. Besides, Jiang Changxian really went too far." Lu Yidao patted Mo Tinga's shoulder and comforted her. "Rest assured, only the few of us know about this. It'll be fine as long as we don't tell anyone else. In the future, tell Junior Marshal Brother Jiang to go out less. He really can't prevent others from scheming against him." Among them, Su Jingji was a member of a small cultivation clan, while the others were individual cultivators. They really didn't have a good impression of hedonistic sons of rich families who took advantage of their power to bully others. Compared to them, Jiang Shanghong only treated them coldly. The others nodded. Su Jingji asked, "How's Senior Marshal Brother Jiang's injury?" His dantian was not injured, but his meridians were affected. "It is not serious, but it will take some time to recover." After confirming that Jiang Shanghong was all right, everyone dispersed. Su Jingji and Qin, she went to cultivate. Mo Tinga felt like she was meddling in other people's business, but she was too embarrassed to let Lu Yidao clean up the mess, so she stayed behind. The two of them chatted on and off. When night fell, they finally saw Jiang Shanghong move. Jiang Shanghong opened his eyes and looked at the two of them in confusion. Soon after, a vigilant look appeared in his eyes. He abruptly sat up, but his wound hurt. His face immediately scrunched up. Lu Yidao comforted him. "Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, don't worry. We won't tell anyone." Seeing that this wasn't his room and the two people in front of him didn't seem hostile, Jiang Shanghong slowly calmed down. He asked, "Were you the ones who saved me?" However, his tone was still bad, as if he was saying, "How could you possibly have saved me?" They finally managed to carry him back with great difficulty. Yet this was his reaction. Mo Tinga was a bit unhappy. She snorted and said, "We just carried you back like you were a dead pig. Since you're all right, return the healing medicine to Senior Marshal Brother Lu and go back to your room. Jiang Shanghong didn't refute her. He took out a jade bottle from his robe and placed it on the table, wanting to get out of bed. Lu Yidao saw him swaying, so he helped him up and advised, Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, you should go out less in the future. Fortunately, Junior Marshal Brother Yi saw you and brought you back. Otherwise, Jiang Shanghong uttered and then said, thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. He then went back to his room and closed the door in front of Lu Yidao. Obviously, he didn't appreciate Lu Yidao's kindness. Mo Tiange was annoyed. She said to Lu Yidao, he really took my kindness for granted. How could Lu Yidao find him pleasing to the eye? It was just that he had a lot of experience and was a lot more mature, so he could only advise her, forget it. Since Junior Marshal Brother Jiang doesn't want to deal with us, we'll just stop dealing with him in the future. In any case, she didn't have any dealings with Jiang Shanghong. This time, she only brought him back conveniently, so she didn't need to be angry. Forget it. Senior Marshal Brother Lu, I'm going back to cultivate. Aside from this little episode, her life didn't change much. Oh, a little bit. Sure enough, that Senior Marshal's sister Murong often looked for her to play. Summoning talismans often flew to her, and her roommates thought she really hooked up with someone, so they always smiled at her ambiguously. But since she invited her so enthusiastically, she couldn't refuse. Besides, this Senior Marshal's sister Murong always used all kinds of seeds to seduce her, so she couldn't help but go. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, hurry up. I can't hurry. Senior Marshal's sister, don't be impatient. Murmurs could be heard coming from the bushes. Two people were struggling. It's done. Finally, Mo Tiange brushed the seasoning one last time and gave a piece of roast meat to Murong Yin. This Senior Marshal's sister Murong really had a common language with her. She only called her out for one thing, to roast meat for her. Mo Tiange frowned. Senior Marshal's sister, eating food like this will affect your cultivation. While gnawing on a piece of pork rib, Murong Yin rolled her eyes. Murong Yin gnawed on a piece of pork rib as she rolled her eyes. Don't think I don't know that food with spiritual aura has less pill poison left behind than medicinal pills. You just don't want to roast it for me. It's not that I don't want to give Senior Marshal's sister face, but Senior Marshal's sister, you're leaning on a big tree to enjoy the shade, so you don't know the difficulties ordinary disciples like us face. The group's minor competition will be held in 3 years. My cultivation level is only in the 8th layer, so if I don't work hard, I'll have no hope. I can only wait another 10 years. Murong Yin could understand Mo Tiange's words. She pondered for a while then, said, Senior Marshal's sister also feels bad for delaying your cultivation. How about this? Junior Marshal Brother, every time you sneak out to eat, send me a summoning talisman. Is that okay? What did she mean by sneak? Mo Tiange nodded gloomily. No problem. Murong Yin gnawed on a large piece of pork rib, then stretched out her hand to pinch Mo Tiange's face. Aya, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, your expression really makes me want to bully you. Mo Tiange's hand was smeared with grease, but she resisted firmly. Senior Marshal's sister, you're too bad. If you pinch me again, I won't roast meat for you. Murong Yin was still smiling. If you don't roast meat for me, I'll pinch you again. Mo Tiange retreated in defeat. Fine, I'll roast you another piece. Don't pinch me. After accepting the bribe, Murong Yin let go. While drooling, she stared at Mo Tiange roasting and asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you really 17? Why do you look like you're 14 or 15? Her question made Mo Tiange even more depressed. She couldn't do anything about it. Among women, she wasn't considered tall, let alone as a man. Moreover, her skin was smooth and her face was hairless. Pretending to be a man was also very difficult for her. Fortunately, Murong Yin was still kind. She patted Mo Tiange's head and said, Don't worry, you'll grow taller. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly in her heart. If she was a man, 17 years old wouldn't be considered too late. Unfortunately, she wasn't, so the chances of her growing taller weren't high. She gloomily handed the roasted meat to Murong Yin, told her something, and went to find a place to wash her hands and face. This place was already upstream of the stream. There was a waterfall above it, and the water flowed down, forming a deep pool below. After making many turns, she was about to go to the pool to wash her hands, but she was stunned. The waterfall was several hundred feet high, and the water flowed rapidly, but there was actually a person sitting and meditating under the waterfall. It wasn't appropriate to say he was sitting. Under the waterfall was a deep pool, and there were no rocks to sit on. That person was sitting cross-legged on the water, letting the waterfall wash down and hit his body. What kind of martial art was he practicing? Tinga was a bit dazed. This seemed like a martial art from the secular world. In fact, martial arts practitioners in the secular world cultivated body-refining techniques. It was just that they weren't as brilliant as those in the cultivation world. But this person, Tinga, couldn't tell. He didn't seem to have the aura of a cultivator, but he seemed very powerful. This person looked very familiar to her. He seemed to be Qin Shi. Chapter 43. Tinga wasn't too familiar with this Qin Shi. Although he wasn't like Jiang Shanhong, who didn't interact with them at all, he had always been very cold. He rarely spoke when he was with them. Usually, he only focused on cultivating and rarely went out. He also didn't cause trouble. Among Yunwu's sect's aura-refining disciples, he wasn't eye-catching. As for cultivation level, although it wasn't easy for him to reach the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm at his age, it wasn't that rare. As for diligence, as long as one was determined to cultivate, 6 or 7 out of 10 people would be as diligent as him. As for his background, he was just an individual cultivator from a destitute cultivation clan. There was really no reason to pay attention to him. If there was anything about him that made him stand out, it would be his handsome appearance. However, for a cultivator, this was not really a good point. For a cultivator, after cultivating, they would naturally be reborn, so they would not be ugly at all. Therefore, Tinga didn't pay too much attention to Qin Shi, and she wasn't interested in studying his cultivation technique. It wasn't until now that she found out he actually cultivated body refining technique. The so-called body refining technique was also a branch of cultivation technique. Aside from the 5 elements and yin and yang, there were many cultivation techniques with special effects in this world, and body refining technique was one of them. This kind of cultivation technique could be traced back to the distant past era. At that time, when the world was just created, immortals, devils, humans, and beasts all lived together. In terms of cultivation, spiritual beasts were more blessed than humans because their bodies were tyrannical and didn't need magic weapons. After cultivating to a certain extent, they could withstand heavenly tribulations. Humans, on the other hand, needed magic weapons and other similar items to withstand heavenly tribulations, so body refining technique was born. When a tyrannical body was matched with a powerful magic weapon, heavenly tribulations were relatively easier to withstand. However, even in the distant past era, body refining technique was never the focus of cultivation because humans were born weak. Cultivating body refining technique was far inferior to spiritual beasts. Moreover, there were many cultivators with great divine power in ancient times, so people often transcended heavenly tribulations and ascended. Now, however, it wasn't the case. Not to mention ascending, even those who cultivated to the nascent soul realm were few and far between. Heavenly tribulations weren't as powerful as they used to be. Moreover, excellent body refining technique was lost, so cultivators below the core formation realm almost didn't cultivate body refining technique. She really didn't expect this Qin Shi to also cultivate body refining technique. It seemed his talent was indeed outstanding, but she didn't know why he wasn't accepted by other cultivation groups. After looking for a while, she washed her hands and face and went back the way she came. What kind of cultivation technique he practiced was his private matter. She couldn't be bothered to look into it. As soon as they returned, Murong Yin made a big fuss. Junior martial brother Yi, you actually took so long to wash your face. Tinga said, Senior martial sister, it's getting late. Aren't you going back yet? Murong Yin looked at the color of the sky. It was already afternoon, so she was extremely reluctant to part. Junior martial brother Yi, the next time you come out, you must call me. Tinga nodded. In. Murong Yin took out a bag from her pocket and handed it to Imo Tinga. Here, next time you call me, I'll give you something good. Thank you, Senior Marshal's sister. The reason she was willing to be ordered around by this Senior Marshal's sister as a manservant was precisely because of this thing. Ever since Murong Yin found out about the characteristics of Imo Tinga's magic arts, she used seeds to seduce Imo Tinga. That was why Mo Tinga came to work as a manservant. Murong Yin had a senior marshal brother who worked in the group's medicinal garden, so it was very convenient for him to get seeds. Imo Tinga didn't have any connections, but someone was willing to help her, so she naturally seized the opportunity. In any case, she only needed to roast something. She could exchange it for a few bags of seeds that couldn't be bought. All right, I know it's because of this thing that you're willing to let me order you around. All right, I'm going back. Murong Yin waved her hand at Imo Tinga. She wiped her hands clean and pretended to be a virtuous lady before she leisurely walked away. Imo Tinga couldn't help but laugh as she watched Murong Yin's back. This was also where Senior Marshal Sister Murong was similar to Tian Xiao. She obviously loved to play around, but she had no choice but to pretend to be a virtuous lady. Tian Xiao. Imo Tinga probably wouldn't see her again in this lifetime. Yi Jingwen said that if she succeeded in her cultivation, she could naturally go back to see her relatives. But later, she realized it was best not to go back after separating from the secular world. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to accept the birth, death, and old age of her relatives. To avoid affecting her cultivation, since she'd already severed her ties with the secular world, it was better not to go back. With a faint sense of sadness, Imo Tinga returned to her room. There were several breaths in the other rooms. Presumably, they were all cultivating. Imo Tinga also returned to her room and began to examine the seeds Murong Yin gave her these past few days. She recognized some seeds, but didn't recognize others. Most of them were seeds of medicinal plants. They didn't have any special uses and couldn't be used in fights of magical power. Her greenwood art was used to plant spiritual aura inside the seeds the moment they were sprouted. In a split second, those plants would grow and be used to attack. Therefore, seeds that didn't have any special uses or needed too much spiritual aura to grow also wouldn't work. This was the limit. Only some low-grade plants could be used to attack. After looking at some seeds, Imo Tinga really couldn't recognize them, so she got up and prepared to go to 10,000 Laws Pavilion. The so-called 10,000 Laws Pavilion was the place where Yunwu sect collected cultivation techniques. Sect disciples could go there once a month. According to their cultivation levels, they could choose some and bring them back. Ever since she entered the sect, Imo Tinga hadn't gone there because she already had the art of Sunu for cultivation and the greenwood art for fights of magical power. She didn't need to choose other cultivation techniques. Compared to other buildings, 10,000 Laws Pavilion's location was rather special. It was neither on the south peak nor the north peak. Instead, it was located in a remote valley between the two peaks. Imo Tinga searched for a while before she finally found the entrance by following the traces of a formation. It was a cave that didn't stand out at all. As soon as she approached the cave entrance, the formation at the entrance suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Imo Tinga didn't panic. Instead, she placed her identity tablet on an empty spot on the mountain wall, and the light immediately faded. The outermost formation of 10,000 Laws Pavilion could be entered as long as one had a disciple's identity tablet. After she stepped into the cave, she saw a very spacious hall inside. There were cave entrances with restrictions on 3 sides, but she didn't know where they led to. Moonstones illuminated the cave as bright as day. The inside of the cave was cool and dry. Imo Tinga didn't know whether this was the effect of a formation or not, but it wasn't only suitable for preserving jade slips. Some books made of paper or other materials could also be preserved. In the corner of the cave, there was a huge table. Behind the table sat several aura-refining cultivators with ordinary cultivation levels. Some of them were meditating, and some of them were dozing off with their heads tilted. Upon seeing her coming in, only one of them lazily raised his eyelids and said, "Identity tablet." Imo Tinga handed over her disciple's identity tablet. The man took it and also took out a jade slip for her to leave her imprint on before he said, "Follow me." He walked to one of the cave entrances and flashed a jade slip. The jade slip emitted a ray of light which fell on the restriction and instantly disappeared. The man threw the jade slip to her. "The jade slip can't leave your body. You must come out before the Z hour. You're not allowed to keep any damaged items. If you need a duplicate, bring the jade slip here. You can make a maximum of 3 jade slips. All right, you can go in now." Tinga thanked him, then took the jade slip and entered the cave. This cave was a bit bigger than the hall outside. The front was densely packed with books, and in the back, aside from jade slips, there were all kinds of strange things. She walked over and flipped through the books first. She found that most of them were ordinary cultivation techniques or were passed down in the mortal world. Presumably, the things recorded in these books weren't profound. Towards the back, there were things recorded on the cauldron. There was a piece of metal engraved with densely packed words, as well as a glass bead that seemed to have many words inside. These things were not ordinary. They were either alchemy techniques, mystical items, or special magical techniques. Tinga first chose a jade slip called The Complete Guide to Spiritual Plants. Then she began to slowly look for useful things inside. She didn't need cultivation techniques, and she didn't have the energy to learn pill concocting, tool refining, and the like. Thus, she found a book called The Essence of Formations. Finally, she found a jade slip that recorded the history of Yunwu's sect. When she went out, the disciple guarding the cave was a bit surprised. He asked, "You've already chosen?" It wasn't strange for him to be surprised. After looking at Tinga's identity tablet, he knew she was a disciple who came here for the first time. Which disciple didn't choose something carefully during their first time in 10,000 Laws Pavilion and spent a lot of time choosing something good? Unlike her, who came out after only an hour. Tinga nodded and handed over the jade tablet and 3 jade slips. "Sorry for troubling you, Senior Martial Brother." The disciple took them and raised his chin at her. 3 spirit stones. Tinga was dumbfounded. "Spirit stones?" The disciple said somewhat impatiently. "Junior Martial Brother, don't you know that copying jade slips requires spirit stones?" She indeed didn't know. However, copying a jade slip for 1 jade slip wasn't a lot, so she immediately took out the spirit stones and handed them over. The disciple took them and quickly copied the jade slips and handed them back to her. Tinga took them and thanked him. Although 3 spirit stones wasn't a lot, ordinary aura refining disciples only got 5 spirit stones a month. If she came in every month to copy 3 jade slips, she'd be spending more than half of her spirit stones. Apparently, even if she entered a cultivation group, her days wouldn't be too good. Chapter 44. After returning from 10,000 Laws Pavilion, Tinga once again entered closed-door meditation. First, she found the uses of the seeds Morong Yin gave her in the complete appraisement of spiritual plants and found several of them were very useful, so she entered closed-door meditation to find the most suitable use for them. Second, she had been idle for a while and had a bottle of aura-converging pills, so it was time for her to continue cultivating. Of course, closed-door meditation for aura-refining cultivators like her wasn't like high-level cultivators who stayed in their practice rooms all the time. They had to eat, exercise, and take a bath. Therefore, Tinga's so-called closed-door meditation was only when she spent all her time cultivating and didn't go out for a stroll. One of the seeds Morong Yin gave her was called bewitching flower, which was one of the raw materials for bewitching powder. Tinga spent several days studying the spiritual aura of the seed thoroughly and was finally able to make it sprout and bloom in an instant. The smell of this flower really had a bewitching effect. There was also a kind of fire thorn, which was much better than the ordinary thorn she had. Its innate talisman contained fire spiritual aura, so if one touched it unguarded, one would be burned. When she could skillfully use these 2 seeds and stabilized her 8th layer realm, she could be considered to have temporarily come out of closed-door meditation. At this time, she encountered the biggest problem. She had no money. In the secular world, it was difficult to move a single step without money. In the cultivation world, it wasn't much better. However, money wasn't gold or silver, but spirit stones. Tinga counted the things in her chinquin bag. Aside from the spirit stones used to lay formations and a bottle of temporarily unused or converging pills, there weren't many things that could be exchanged for money. The man from Inclan's spirit stones had long been used to buy medicinal pills. Their spirit tools couldn't be exchanged for money in the market square of Mount Yunwu. Otherwise, she would be in trouble. The only things left were some spiritual plants, tool refining materials, and a bead the size of a wine cup. After asking second uncle, Tinga sold all the materials. As for the bead, even second uncle didn't know its use, so she just left it there. However, those two were aura refining cultivators, so the materials they carried weren't very good. She didn't exchange them for much and soon spent them all. Once again, she struggled to make a living. Because of her poor spiritual roots, she couldn't take medicinal pills and had no choice but to use a spirit gathering formation. However, all of these required spirit stones. Otherwise, according to the sect's ration, she would need 3 aura-nourishing pills and 5 spirit stones a month. If she wanted to advance to the 10th layer, it would really take a long time. But other than formations, she didn't know anything else, and the money she earned from selling formations was only enough to treat second uncle's injuries. During another sermon, Su Jingji saw Tinga moaning and groaning. After he asked for the reason, he asked her with astonishment, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, why didn't you go and get an errand? This is much better than finding your own way to make money." Huh? Tinga was dumbfounded. Su Jingji sighed and earnestly instructed her, "Why do we have to risk our lives to enter a cultivation group? Isn't it precisely because the cultivation group has abundant resources? In addition to the monthly ration, the sect also has many errands for us to do, and these errands have other rewards. You see, I didn't cultivate much in the first 3 months. I ran errands everywhere and earned a lot of spirit stones, which allowed me to cultivate in seclusion for half a year without any worries." His words made Tinga suddenly see the light. She actually forgot that cultivation group disciples had their own benefits and didn't need to think about seeking work outside. Tinga patted her head a few times, then temporarily stopped cultivating and began to run errands. The so-called errands were missions given to disciples by the cultivation group. Some things were inconvenient for part-time disciples to do, so official disciples would be the ones to complete them. Once again, Tinga entered the steward's hall. This was the second time she saw Marshal Uncle Yu in the courtyard's main hall. This Marshal Uncle Yu was cultivating again. On the other hand, there was another aura-refining disciple who was tidying up something on the side. Upon seeing her, this seemingly ordinary male disciple asked, "Are you going to hand it over or take it?" Tinga pondered for a moment before she reacted. She said, "I'll have to trouble Senior Marshal Brother. I'm here to get an errand." The man extended his hand towards her. Identity tablet. Tinga took out her identity tablet and handed it over. The man examined it and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the identity tablet before he threw her a jade slip. "The white ones are free as long as you meet the requirements." Tinga inserted her divine sense into the slip, and all the errands appeared in her mind. These errands could basically be divided into several categories. The first was to guard the sect and other miscellaneous matters. The second was to go out and search for certain things. And the third was to guard the spirit stone mine and run a shop. The first type of errands were all quite popular. She could tell from the attitude of the guarding disciples in the 10,000 Laws Pavilion that day that the rewards were good and the errands were in the sect. The second type of errands were rich, but they were more difficult and required luck. The third type of errands required her to spend a lot of time away from the sect. Tinga didn't want to do this. Although she had a lot of time to cultivate, the outside world was certainly not as good as the spirit veins in the sect. In that case, she could only choose the first type. Tinga looked up and said with a smile, "Senior Marshal Brother, I want to do this errand of collecting heavenly dew." "Oh." The disciple glanced at her a few times. Because the reward for this errand wasn't high and it was very complicated, few people were willing to do it. Of course, he wouldn't have any objections. He took out a jade slip, recorded something, and handed it to her. Okay, go to the North Peaks, Zhengyang Hall, and look for Martial Uncle Wang Xiao. He'll tell you what to do. Mo Tinga took the jade slip, thanked him, and went straight to the North Peak without stopping. In fact, how could she not want a better errand? However, after looking around, all the good ones were already taken. Although this one was a bit troublesome, in any case, it was on the North Peak. The spiritual aura in the North Peak was rich, so spending some time cultivating there every day might be much better than cultivating in the South Peak. With the jade slip, her journey to the North Peak was smooth. The North and South Peaks of Mount Yunwu were several hundred feet apart, separated by an abyss. Aura refining disciples couldn't fly in the air, so it would probably take more than half a day to go from the South Peak to the North Peak using light body technique. However, there was an expert senior who built an iron chain bridge between the two peaks, which greatly facilitated the disciples' travel. If they crossed the bridge, it would only take them a short while to reach the North Peak. As soon as she arrived at the North Peak, Mo Tinga felt that the spiritual aura here was several times denser than in the South Peak. Cultivating in this kind of place was much more effective. Moreover, the North Peak was heavily guarded. Not only were there foundation-building cultivators patrolling, but there were also extremely powerful formations and restrictions. With Mo Tinga's attainments and formations, she could only see that this formation was a set of Yunwu Sect's Great Mountain Protecting Formation. In short, it was a formation within a formation. According to common sense, the power of the formation inside the formation should be enough to split the mountains and split the seas. Mo Tinga found Zhengyang Hall and told the guarding disciple that she was looking for Martial Uncle Wang Xiao. The disciple pointed to a side hall. Mo Tinga walked over and looked around. Seeing that there was only a 10th layer aura refining disciple inside, she couldn't help but feel strange. This disciple was a female cultivator. She was also about 20 years old and had a beautiful appearance. Most female cultivators weren't that ugly. As cultivators, they naturally had some different ways to beautify themselves. In addition, their bodies had spiritual aura, so their skin was naturally fair and bright. The female disciple turned around and asked, "Who are you? What's the matter?" Mo Tinga hastily greeted her and said, "Senior Marshal's sister, I received the errand of collecting heavenly dew and came to look for Martial Uncle Wang." "Oh, you can come in. I'm his disciple. Just tell me." Upon hearing this, Mo Tinga handed the jade tablet she received to her. The disciple examined it and smiled. "So it's Junior Martial Brother Yi. My name is Wang Qianni. In the future, you can just tell me about this errand." Her surname was also Wang. Judging from her tone, her relationship with Martial Uncle Wang wasn't shallow. Mo Tinga answered, "Yes. Senior Marshal's sister, can you tell me what to do?" Wang Qianni took out several jade bottles and handed them to her. Heavenly dew is dew that hasn't dried yet and contains spiritual aura in the early morning. Every day, at the hour of the Yin and Mao, go to the forest to collect dew and bring it here when it's full. Remember, I want the dew on clean spirit grass, nothing else. Got it. Mo Tinga took the jade bottles and asked, "How many bottles do I need to collect per day?" Wang Qianni smiled. "It's already good enough if you can collect 1 bottle per day." "How many bottles?" "Just go and give them to me every day at the hour of the Mao. I'll give you as many as you have." Chapter 45. When Mo Tinga first heard the requirement to collect heavenly dew, it seemed quite simple. She even muttered, "Why didn't they ask a part-time disciple to do it?" It was only after she went there herself that she realized it wasn't simple. There were many flowers and trees with spiritual energy, but there were few spiritual herbs. Moreover, only dew with spiritual energy could be called heavenly dew. Often, spiritual herbs grew on cliffs, so one had to fly up and down to collect them. After busying herself for 4 hours, she only managed to gather less than half a bottle. Seeing that the sun had already risen, she shook her head helplessly and gave the jade bottle containing the heavenly due to Wang Qianyi. Seeing that Wang Qianyi was satisfied with the bottle Mo Tinga brought, Mo Tinga heaved a sigh of relief. She then left Xingyang Hall and returned to the South Peak. This errand wasn't difficult at all. As for the income, she could earn about 12 spirit stones a month, which could be exchanged for 5 or 6 or nourishing pills. However, these medicinal pills were still a drop in the bucket for Mo Tinga. Therefore, after asking Su Jingji, she went to the steward's hall to ask if there were any other errands she could do at the same time. Now that she thought about money, Mo Tinga felt like her head was about to explode. In the past, second uncle always took care of everything for her, so she basically didn't need to worry about it. Later on, when second uncle was injured, she stopped taking pills and was barely able to get by. But now that she wanted to break through to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, money became her biggest problem. Aside from Su Jingji, who earned a lot of spirit stones some time ago, the others living with her also started to get busy with this matter. Louis Dao was the same as Mo Tinga. He went out early and came back late every day. Jiang Shanghong said it was best for them not to go out, but without medicinal pills to cultivate, he couldn't care about anything else. Qin Shi, on the other hand, was quite good. Because he had some knowledge about concocting medicinal pills, a martial uncle in the North Peak took him away. In total, Mo Tinga accepted 3 errands. Even when senior martial sister Morong came to look for her to play, she didn't respond. After being so busy for several months, Mo Tinga finally stopped making money because Yunwu sect made a public announcement. All the aura refining disciples gathered in the square. Over 1,000 people were completely silent. Not long after, a person walked out of the real treasure hall. It was the sect leader, Fong Dingwei, followed by several foundation building cultivators. Disciples, I've gathered all of you here today to tell you something. In order to test our disciples, Jindao School and Zixia sect invited us to fight against Yunwu sect. I've already accepted their challenge. This time, all disciples above the 7th layer of the aura refining realm must participate. 1 month later, they will enter Miwu Valley for 3 days. The winner will be rewarded handsomely. As for the specifics, the disciple in charge will explain it to you in detail. Disciples, for the sake of Yunwu sect's reputation, I hope you'll spare no effort. In the square, all the disciples whispered to each other. Some of the more experienced disciples who had experienced such things shook their heads and explained to the new disciples. On Mo Tinga's side, aside from senior martial brother Zhou, the others hadn't been in the sect for more than a year. Only a few of them had heard about it and told them about it. As it turned out, in the vicinity of Yunwu sect, there were 2 cultivation groups with similar strength, Jindao School and Zixia sect. These 3 cultivation groups stood like a tripod in this area. All resources and spirit veins had to be shared with the other 2 cultivation groups. The 3 sects rose and fell. If one of them became stronger, they would want to get a bigger share of the resources. However, they were also afraid that the conflict would be too intense and all 3 would be injured. In the end, they thought of a way to compete without losing their strength. This was the origin of Miwu Valley's challenge. The so-called Miwu Valley was a valley between the monasteries of the 3 cultivation groups. The valley was filled with dense fog, so ordinary people couldn't enter. The seniors of the 3 cultivation groups laid restrictions and formations in this valley so that their disciples could enter and compete with each other. The one who persisted until the end would be the winner. The sect head's voice once again rang out. Disciples, in this competition, the disciple who persisted until the end will receive a high-grade spirit tool, 2 bottles of aura-converging pills, and 100 spirit stones. In addition, according to the number of people defeated, you will receive spirit stones as a reward. Even if you fail halfway, you will still receive spirit stones as a reward. All right, supervising disciple, take the disciple under control back and explain everything in detail. In half a month, the challenge will begin. Mo Tinga, who was filled with questions, followed everyone back to their residence. Senior martial brother Zhou called everyone to gather in the courtyard and once again explained the matter of Miwu Valley. As it turned out, for the sake of this competition, the seniors of the 3 cultivation groups placed restrictions on every disciple's identity tablet. As long as the identity tablet was hung on the disciple's body, there wouldn't be any life-threatening danger. Once the identity tablet left the body, the person would be teleported away in an instant, and the person who was teleported away would be considered to have failed. Miwu Valley was very big. Once you entered, there would be the danger of encountering spiritual beasts. However, this could also be regarded as an additional reward. The spiritual beasts and spiritual plants inside would belong to the disciple who participated in the competition. Mo Tinga carefully calculated and couldn't help but become interested in this competition in Miwu Valley. If she persisted until the end, there would be 2 bottles of aura-converging pills, and each bottle contained 10 pills. She already had 1 bottle, which contained 30 aura-converging pills, which would be enough for her to advance to the 9th layer of the aura refining realm. If she was lucky, she might even be able to advance to the 10th layer. Even if she didn't persist until the end, there would still be spirit stones as a reward. Moreover, there wouldn't be any life-threatening danger, so it was completely worth the risk. Right now, whenever she saw spirit stones and medicinal pills, her eyes would shine. She really couldn't miss this opportunity. With such a generous reward, the others were naturally the same. Seeing how excited they were, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou let out a humph and poured cold water on them. Junior Marshal Brothers, do you think this reward is so easy to obtain? The transporting formation in Miwu Valley will teleport you to a random place in the valley. If you happen to be teleported to the mouth of a spiritual beast, you'll be teleported out. In addition, the terrain in the valley is complicated and dangerous. You might walk into the midst of enemies while you're walking. Therefore, after you enter Miwu Valley, the first thing you must do is find a safe place to rendezvous with your fellow disciples. You won't be able to persist for a long time by relying on your own strength. Once everyone heard this, they calmed down a bit. Someone asked, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou, you're also going, right? Senior Marshal Brother Zhou nodded. Yes, I'm also an aura refining disciple, so I naturally have to go. Everyone here is in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm or above, so everyone has to go. To tell you the truth, the last time we competed was more than 10 years ago. At that time, I was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, but I didn't even last for a day before I was besieged and forced out. Therefore, you mustn't lower your guard. They were more or less clear about Senior Marshal Brother Zhou's strength. Usually, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was responsible for explaining to them the difficulties they encountered in their cultivation. It could be said that Senior Marshal Brother Zhou's realm was much higher than theirs. Now that even Senior Marshal Brother Zhou said this, everyone couldn't help but suppress their excitement and think about the opportunities and difficulties involved. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou chuckled. You don't need to be so worried. Even if you come out very quickly, you won't lose anything. Just do your best. Buy some talismans or something to protect yourself or form a small team with others. The transporting formation can teleport up to 5 people at the same time, so it'll be best if all 5 of you can gather together. All right, go and prepare yourselves. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou waved his hand and left. Everyone else went back to their respective rooms while discussing their own plans. Once they returned to their rooms, Lu Yidao asked, Junior Marshal Brothers, what are your plans? Su Jingji said, of course we'll go together. Senior Marshal Brother Lu, that transporting formation can teleport up to 5 people at the same time, so we'll be in the same room. As he spoke, he glanced at Jiang Shanghong. Unexpectedly, Jiang Shanghong didn't walk away, nor did he express any objections. Apparently, he also knew he wouldn't be able to go alone this time. Lu Yidao nodded. I also think so. Junior Marshal Brothers, what do you think? Mo Tinga said, I have no objections. Of course, staying with Senior Marshal Brothers will be safer. Qin Shi also nodded. Everyone looked at Jiang Shanghong. His expression was still stiff, but in the end, he nodded. All right. Lu Yidao was quite happy. This was the first time everyone worked together. That being the case, let's discuss what we should do this time. Junior Marshal Brothers, Chapter 46. Emotinga was both excited and depressed about this trip to Miwu Valley. She was excited because if she could persist until the end, she would be rewarded handsomely and wouldn't have to worry about medicinal pills for a long time. She was depressed because she would have to spend the spirit stones she earned in the last 2 to 3 months. She bought some talismans, asked Morone Yin to get some seeds, and prepared some temporary formations. She had almost used up all the spirit stones she had. During this time, the 5 people in the same room became closer than ever. They kept each other informed about what they were going to do and what they were going to do. They planned to win in one fell swoop in this trip to Miwu Valley. Motinga was naturally happy to see some of them working together, but she wouldn't put all her hopes on her companions. She spent all the spirit stones she had. Even if she couldn't persist until the end, she still had to get some rewards in order to not suffer a loss. A month passed in the blink of an eye. All the aura refining disciples in the 7th layer and above gathered in the square again. This time, aside from the sect head, there were also 2 core formation cultivators in the square. Yunwu sect only had 1 nascent soul cultivator and 7 or 8 core formation cultivators. This time, the sect head and 2 core formation cultivators showed up together. Disciples, don't talk nonsense. Today is the day of the competition between the 3 cultivation groups in Miwu Valley. I presume you already know about this matter, so I won't repeat it. However, there's one thing I want to tell you. To encourage the disciples, the sect has decided that the 3 disciples who win the most victories will be rewarded with an additional 500 spirit stones and a bottle of aura converging pills. The sect head's words caused an uproar in the square. 500 spirit stones. Ordinary aura refining disciples only earned 5 spirit stones a month, and ordinary errands only earned about 10 spirit stones a month. Mo Tinga had been busy for several months and almost didn't have time to cultivate, but she only earned about 100 spirit stones. Ordinary aura converging pills cost 2 spirit stones each, while aura converging pills cost 25 spirit stones each. 500 spirit stones were completely enough to cover the rewards for persisting until the end, not to mention the additional bottle of aura converging pills. Emotinga was very excited. 500 spirit stones and a bottle of aura converging pills. If she could persist until the end and obtain those 2 bottles of aura converging pills, she could completely focus on closed door meditation until the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard someone coughing. Emotinga immediately calmed down. Only the top 3 would receive this reward. She herself was only in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Not to mention, there was more than 1 foundation building cultivator like senior Marshall Brother Zhou. Besides, there were at least 100 disciples whose cultivation levels were higher than hers. Her chances of getting into the top 3 were indeed very slim. At this moment, the sect leader and the other 2 core formation cultivators exchanged a few words. The 3 of them spread out and took out their magic treasures. It was a giant tortoise, a boat, and a square handkerchief that was spread out over an acre of land. The sect leader shouted, "Disciples in charge, bring your disciples here." Senior Marshall Brother Zhou gathered the 20 or so disciples together and said, "Junior Marshall Brothers, we're going to Miwu Valley now. We've said everything we need to say, so let's do our best." After he finished speaking, he led everyone forward and lined up to board the small boat in the middle. When the several hundred disciples all boarded the 3 flying magic weapons, the core formation grandmasters controlled their respective magic weapons. In an instant, the 3 magic weapons soared into the sky and flew forward at an extremely fast speed. The aura refining disciples on the magic weapons were all amazed. Flying magic weapons. Aura refining disciples could only use the light body technique. Only those who reached the foundation building realm could use spirit tools or magic weapons to fly. However, only core formation magic weapons could carry so many people at such a fast speed. She didn't know whether any of the people on the flying magic weapons today would be able to advance into the core formation realm. It should be known that in a medium cultivation group like Yunwu's sect, only 1 core formation cultivator would appear every 100 years. maybe none of them would be able to advance into the core formation realm. Emotinga kept her lament to herself. Among these disciples, there was no lack of talented people, but even they weren't sure they could advance to the core formation realm, let alone her. The speed of these flying magic weapons was extremely fast. The sect head steered the tortoise spiritual beast to fly in the front, while the others followed closely behind. About 4 to 6 hours later, their speed finally slowed down and they slowly descended. Emotinga lowered her head and looked down. There was a mountain with a flat top next to a misty canyon. There were already a lot of people parked on the mountain. There were cultivators wearing yellow clothes and purple clothes. Apparently, they were the disciples of Jindao school and Zixia sect. When all of them landed, the sect head and the other 2 core formation grandmasters put away their magic weapons and walked towards the center of the mountain, where several core formation cultivators were already waiting. After they greeted each other, the sect head said, "Brother Jean and Brother Li are so impatient. They arrived so early." Those 2 people were presumably the sect heads of Jindao school and Zixia sect. The one called Brother Jean was relatively young. He seemed to be in his early 30s, but it was unclear whether he had taken look-preserving pills or similar medicinal pills. The other person was much older than sect head Fong. His hair and beard were already grizzled. Apparently, his lifespan wasn't very long. The younger person let out a humph and said in a rather unhappy manner, "Brother Fong, you're just too confident. My Jindao school's strength isn't good enough, so we came early to prepare." Emotinga had heard that Jindao school had internal strife 100 years ago. Currently, their strength hadn't recovered yet. Presumably, this school head Jean was dissatisfied with the competition in Miwu Valley. After all, if their disciples weren't good enough, they would have to share the profits. The old man, surnamed Li, on the other hand, had his eyes half closed and was calm and composed. He said, "Brother Fong, long time no see." Apparently, this person was the sect head of Zixia sect. This competition was proposed by Zixia sect. It was said that Zixia sect was the opposite of Jindao school. In the past 100 years, they had accepted many good disciples. Seeing that they were even stronger than Jindao school and Yunwu sect, they couldn't help but want a share of the profits. Emotinga wanted to continue watching, but Lu Yidao patted her shoulder and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, let's get together." Emotinga turned her head and uttered a yes. The disciples of the 3 groups were all on this mountain. Some were meditating, and some were whispering to each other. The 5 of them found a place with fewer people and sat down in a circle. Lu Yidao said cautiously, "Junior Marshal Brothers, I have to emphasize something first. The 5 of us are traveling together and cooperating with each other. We have to share our hearts with each other. We can't just say what we mean and ruin other people's futures." The others all nodded. This was the basic requirement of cooperation. Otherwise, if they couldn't trust each other, how could they travel together? Lu Yidao continued to emphasize, "Hang your identity tablets properly. Putting them in your chinkoan bag is useless." The others checked their identity tablets and confirmed there were no problems. Lu Yidao continued to say, "Let's make this clear first. We'll cooperate to defeat the enemy, and we'll divide the identity tablets equally. If there isn't enough, we'll divide them according to the role they played in the fight. We mustn't argue about this. If we have any objections, we'll discuss it properly. What do you guys think?" Su Jingji agreed. "Of course. Now that we're in Miwu Valley, we're companions. If we argue, other people will take advantage of us." Emotinga also nodded. The other 2 also didn't object. Seeing this, Lu Yidao happily said, "That's all I wanted to say. Do any of you have any questions?" For this trip to Miwu Valley, everyone tacitly agreed that Lu Yidao would be the leader. They all expressed that they would let him make the decisions. Right after they finished speaking, several sect heads gathered in one place and said in unison, "Disciples, gather. The competition is about to begin." Chapter 47. With the 3 sect heads working together, a transporting formation suddenly appeared in midair above the mountaintop. This was Emotinga's first time seeing a transporting formation. Although she studied formations, the scale of a transporting formation wasn't inferior to that of a great mountain-protecting formation. Her current attainments in formations were far from enough. The circular transporting formation in front of her was covered with profound cloud patterns and spirit stones. The whole formation shone brightly and emitted a mysterious aura. She stared fixedly at the transporting formation, trying to comprehend its meaning. All formations were interpreted according to the yin and yang of the world, the 5 elements, and the 8 trigrams, but she couldn't understand the meaning of these complicated 8 trigrams patterns. Tinga sighed. It wasn't that her attainments in formations weren't high enough, but there were some things she couldn't understand in her current realm. Perhaps she could only understand them after advancing to the foundation-building realm, or even the core formation realm or nascent soul realm. Once the formation appeared, the disciples scrambled to be the first to be transported. If the elders of the sect weren't here, there might have been some conflicts. A moment later, it was finally their turn. With a flash of white light, the 5 of them disappeared into the transporting formation. Tinga opened her eyes and couldn't help but feel astonished. What was this place? At that moment, the others also opened their eyes to observe their surroundings. They all frowned. The place they were in was surrounded by rock walls and a long and narrow passage. It seemed to be a cave. Where is this? Su Jingji asked while looking around. We won't be transported to a spiritual beast cave, right? As soon as he said that, everyone else's expressions changed. Yes, this place indeed looked like a cave. Maybe it was the habitat of a spiritual beast. If that was the case, they really hit the jackpot. They didn't need to encounter the disciples of the other 2 cultivation groups. This spiritual beast would give them a good beating. Lu Yidao calmed down first and said, Junior Marshall Brother Su is right. We'd better be careful. The 5 of them observed for a while, then chose a direction, summoned their spirit tools or protective spells, and cautiously moved forward. However, they didn't know what kind of spiritual beast cave it was. There were many forks in the road. The 5 of them walked back and forth, bypassing several dead ends, but they couldn't find the exit and didn't encounter any spiritual beasts. They gradually lost their way. This cave was simply like a maze. No matter where they went, their surroundings didn't change at all. Even the rock walls had the same pattern. After walking for nearly an hour, everyone finally lost their patience. Su Jingji took the lead and said, We can't get out of here like this. Even Jiang Shanghong had an impatient expression on his face. Tinga also felt a hint of irritation in her heart. This scenery was indeed unchanging, which made her feel annoyed. After pondering for a long time, Lu Yidao said, How about we split up and look for the way? The few of them hesitated. If they split up, what would they do if they encountered spirit beasts? Let's split up then. Tinga finally made up her mind and said, We don't know whether this is a spiritual beast cave or not. Maybe it's just an underground karst cave? If we keep going around like this, who knows when we'll end up? Why don't we split up and explore the way? Yes, Su Jingji said, I agree with Junior Marshall Brother Yi. Even if we really encounter some danger, we can just treat it as us coming here to broaden our horizons. We won't lose anything. Seeing that no one objected, Lu Yidao said, That being the case, should we split into 2 or 3 groups? It might be safer if we split into 2 groups, but it'll be faster if we split into 3 groups. She said, Since we decided to split up, let's split into 3 groups. All right, if we split into 3 groups, I'll take 1 group. Junior Marshall Brother Jiang and Junior Marshall Brother Qin, the 2 of you will take 1 group each. Lu Yidao arranged the groups this way because among the 5 of them, he, Jiang Shanghong, and Qin were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, while Su Jingji and Tinga were in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. This way, they wouldn't be defeated too quickly if they encountered danger. It could be said that Lu Yidao would suffer the most if he went alone, so the others didn't have any objections. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. Qin thanked him, then turned towards Tinga and Su Jingji. Junior Marshal Brothers, who will go with me? Tinga and Su Jingji glanced at each other. Su Jingji then said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you go with Senior Marshal Brother Qin. I'll go with Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. He then winked at her. Mo Tiange understood what he meant. She saved Jiang Shanghong last time, but he didn't appreciate it at all. Su Jingji knew she hated Jiang Shanghong, so he told her to go with Qin Shi. Mo Tiange also knew Su Jingji's relationship with Jiang Shanghong was a bit better than hers, so she didn't refuse and nodded. Okay, the five of them split into groups and set off in different directions. The road was still like a maze with unchanging rock walls. Mo Tiange walked with Qin Shi for a while. There were several dead ends, but she still marked them according to the method she used just now. However, it still didn't work. This went on for another half an hour, and Mo Tiange started to feel a bit impatient. She became more and more certain that this wasn't a spiritual beast cave. It might be a maze set up by the seniors of the 3 cultivation groups. Spiritual beasts simply didn't have the ability to create a maze like this, so they couldn't even tell which direction was inside. At this moment, Qin Shi suddenly turned around and glanced at her. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, guard your mind. Mo Tiange was startled. She realized she was about to be controlled by her impatience. She was shocked and hastily guarded her dantian with aura. Only then did her mind become clear. She couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Thank you for reminding me, Senior Marshal Brother. It seemed this maze wasn't that simple. When one was inside, one's mind would unconsciously become unstable. This way, when one encountered danger, it would be very easy to make mistakes. What in the world is this? Qin Shi carefully looked at the surrounding rock walls and asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, do you know the Tao formations? Mo Tiange nodded. I know a thing or two. Then, don't you think this looks like a formation? Mo Tiange had long felt this way, so she immediately said, yes, everywhere here is exactly the same. It seems like there's no end to it. It's very much like a maze. However, if this is a formation, the cultivation level of the person who said it must be above the foundation building realm. From what I know, it'll be very difficult to break it. Qin Shi wasn't disappointed. He said, I've indeed heard that Miwu Valley used to be a place for closed-door meditation before the competition took place. Maybe this is a formation left behind by those seniors. Oh, this was Mo Tiange's first time hearing this. She asked curiously, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, where did you hear this? Qin, she said, a martial uncle in the North Peak told me about it. I only heard him mention it. However, because the spirit veins here were getting worse and the fog was getting thicker, people gradually stopped coming here. Later, the 3 cultivation groups found this valley again in order to find a place for the competition. In that case, when they chose the place for the competition, they should have carefully examined it. Why do they still leave this formation here? Maybe it's because it's too hidden, or maybe they thought this formation could be used as part of the competition. This was indeed possible. Mo Tiange didn't say anything more. She continued to carefully examine it with Qin Shi step by step. Even if it was a formation laid by a high-level cultivator, there must be a formation eye. As long as they found it, they could easily get out. Chapter 48. Mo Tiange paused and carefully looked at the rock wall for a long time. She also touched the surface of the rock wall. Qin Shi stopped beside her. What's wrong? Mo Tiange carefully observed for a while, then said, There's something wrong here. Upon hearing that, Qin Shi walked closer and saw that the rock wall was still covered with irregular natural patterns. Upon seeing his doubtful gaze, Mo Tiange pointed at the patterns and said, Do you remember what the other patterns look like? Qin Shi shook his head. I'm not proficient in formations, so I can't tell. Mo Tiange said, It seems meaningless, but in fact there's a vague layer of magic on it. It's actually the position of the 8 trigrams. 8 trigrams? Qin Shi frowned. You're saying the problem is on this rock wall? Mo Tiange nodded. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, this is the 8 gates life and death formation of the Qimen Duanjia. 8 gates life and death formation. Qin Shi's frown deepened. He muttered to himself and suddenly said, Then, can we leave this formation if we find the life gate and the opening gate? In theory, that's right, Mo Tinga said, but in reality, it's not so absolute. Because in high-level formations, the 8 gates can even change and are difficult to grasp. I've only seen some clues about this formation now, so it's obviously not simple. I'm not sure whether we can find the life gate or not. No matter what, we have to try. Mo Tinga nodded. Yes, failure is better than being trapped here. It can't be considered a victory if we don't get a single identity tablet. After carefully examining it, she said, "This is the Jun position. It seems to be the pain gate, which has the wood attribute. I practice a wood attribute cultivation technique. Let me try." She stood in front of the rock wall. Mo Tinga stood in front of the rock wall, took out her greenwood sword, poured spiritual aura into it, and suddenly controlled it to rush towards the rock wall. The moment the sword collided with the rock wall, a layer of light appeared on the rock wall, blocking the attack of the greenwood sword. Seeing this, Mo Tinga mobilized all the spiritual aura in her body and rushed forward without backing down. The layer of light was finally pierced by the sword and disappeared without a trace. The moment the greenwood sword touched the rock wall suddenly exploded. Suddenly, the scenery changed, and they were standing in front of another rock wall. It was as if everything that had just happened was an illusion, and the rock wall was undamaged. A smile appeared on Mo Tinga's face. The gate of pain has been broken. This is the Li position, the Li Palace's gate of view, a position of fire. She wrinkled her brows in embarrassment. I'm not proficient in fire spells. I can only cast a few fireballs. What about you, senior brother Qin? Qin, she said, I mainly cultivate metal and fire elements, so I'll do it. Mo Tinga felt relieved and took a step back. She watched as she took out a sword from his chinquan bag and unsheathed it. Upon seeing this sword, Mo Tinga couldn't help but feel somewhat astonished. This sword's entire body was golden, and within the flames, its aura was astonishing. Compared to her greenwood sword, it was unknown how many times more imposing it was. It was actually a magical treasure. It wasn't that she hadn't seen magic treasures before. The spirit-concealing jade pendant Yi Jingwen gave her to conceal her constitution was precisely a magic treasure. More than half a year ago, when she killed that man from Clan, the enchanting lantern she obtained was also a magic treasure. However, aside from concealing one's aura and purifying spiritual aura, that spirit-concealing jade pendant didn't have any other effects. That enchanting lantern was an illusion-inducing magic treasure. It looked ordinary and unremarkable, unlike the sword in front of her, which had a threatening aura. She moved his spiritual aura and swung his sword in a very ordinary manner. However, with a rumbling sound, the defensive spell on the rock wall was destroyed without any resistance. The rock wall exploded, and the two of them returned to the scene they were in before. She sheathed the sword, then glanced at her. It wasn't easy for me to obtain this sword. If other people found out about it, I wouldn't have a day of peace. I hope Junior Marshal Brother Yi can help me conceal this and not tell other people. Mo Tinga was very clear about what a flying sword magic weapon represented. If she took out the enchanting lantern in her hand, countless cultivators would covet it, let alone this sword. It was no wonder that she never took out this sword in front of other people. An ordinary man was innocent, but treasuring a jade ring was a crime. If other people found out about this, how could a small, aura-refining cultivator keep such a magic weapon? Mo Tinga nodded in understanding. Rest assured, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, we can only escape if we work together. Once we leave this place, I'll just pretend I didn't see anything today. She showed a faint smile, but this smile made Mo Tinga dumbfounded. She had known him for a long time, but she had never seen him smile. He was originally handsome, but when he smiled, he looked even more graceful and handsome, making people unable to look away. It wasn't until she saw his questioning expression that Mo Tinga hastily withdrew her gaze, feeling annoyed in her heart. Really, it's not like I've never seen a man before. I've disguised myself as a man and mingled with men for a long time, but I'm actually staring at a man in a daze. To cover up her gaffe, She hastily looked at the pattern on the rock wall. DUI, Shockgate, Metal Element. Qin, she stepped forward. I'll do it. It was still the same sword, but it was covered with a layer of golden aura. Qin, she stimulated the spiritual aura on it, and a moment later, the shock gate was broken. This time, Imo was overjoyed. Because the rock wall in front of them was different, the surrounding rock walls moved one after another. In a flash, the passage between the rock walls turned into a stone room. The two of them cast defensive spells and cautiously walked in. This stone room was very high and very spacious. There was only a shelf in the corner with a few things on it. Imo looked around the shelf, but she couldn't see any traces of formations or restrictions. Finally, she picked up a book made of animal skin. Chimin Duanjia. She opened it. Sure enough, it was a book describing formations. Qin Shi, who was holding the other book, let out a cry of surprise. Imo looked at him. What's wrong? Qin Shi waved the book at her and said, This golden body art is a high-level body refining art from our school. I've inquired about it. This art is placed in the most secret room of 10,000 Laws Pavilion. It's said that only grandmasters in the core formation realm or above can read it. Imo remembered that he also cultivated body refining art. It seemed he was indeed very interested in this book. Qin Shi flipped through the book and said to her, Junior Martial Brother Yi, this book is very useful to me. This book belongs to me, and the rest belongs to you. What do you think? This body refining art wasn't very useful to Imo. On the contrary, the formation book in her hand was no less useful to her than Qin Shi's body refining art. She originally thought that even if all these things belonged to Qin Shi, she would still exchange this book. Now that Qin Shi was willing to give up other things, she naturally wouldn't disagree. In addition to these two books, there were several other books, jade slips, and 2 jade bottles. Among them, there was a pill concocting book, and the others were cultivation notes. The medicinal pills in the jade bottles weren't any good. They were just spirit-cleansing pills. Some medicinal pills would leave behind pill poison after being eaten, and these spirit-cleansing pills were used to remove pill poison, so they weren't valuable. Imo swept all the things into her Chinquan bag without any guilt. What is this place? Why does it seem like it was deliberately set up to reward us? Qin, she said, it might really be left behind by the elders of the school. These things aren't important to them, so it seems they were meant to reward the disciples who broke the formations. As they spoke, sounds came from outside the stone room. It seemed like someone was coming this way. Imo and Qin, she glanced at each other. They each took out their spirit tools, cast defensive spells, and stared at the door of the stone room. At that moment, the sound of the door became clear. Several cultivators dressed in yellow clothes broke in. Chapter 49. They were Jin Dao School's disciples. There were 5 of them in total, 2 in the 10th layer, 1 in the 9th layer, and 2 in the 8th layer. Imo frowned. With the special effect of greenwood art, she could protect herself against 2 or 3 cultivators with similar cultivation levels. But if there were more than 3, she didn't know how many Qin she could handle. At that moment, Qin she put away his sword and said in a low voice, Junior Martial Brother Yi, leave the 2 10th layer aura refining cultivators to me. You try to trap the others. Imo nodded. Whether it was greenwood art or formation she was good at, they were good at trapping, not killing. If she had to fight the other 3, she really wouldn't have any confidence, but it would be much easier to trap them temporarily. Qin, she wanted to meet them. Sure enough, when the other party saw that his cultivation level was also in the 10th layer, the 2 10th layer cultivators both rushed forward and controlled their spirit tools to attack him. Since the Immortals' assembly, Imo hadn't seen Qin Shi fight. However, he was very proficient in the use of spells and practiced body refining techniques, so he was suitable for fights of magical power. Presumably, he was stronger than ordinary 10th layer aura refining cultivators. She didn't have time to deal with Qin Shi because 2 of the other 3 people rushed towards her. Mo took a step back and used her footwork to dodge the 2 people's attacks. She then took out her greenwood sword and hovered in the air to restrain them while sprinkling seeds in her hand. The two people didn't know what the seeds in her hand were, so they chose to dodge. But in the next moment, they discovered that when the seeds fell near their feet, they immediately grew thorns. These thorns glowed red, and as soon as they touched them, they immediately felt a burning pain. Taking advantage of the fact that they couldn't react, Enchanting threw out another handful of seeds. The fire thorns once again grew, forming a simple spirit-trapping formation that surrounded them. The seeds that flew after her suddenly turned into a huge white flower the moment they touched them. The flower's petals bloomed, releasing a tempting fragrance. The two people suddenly felt dizzy and couldn't summon their spiritual aura. Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief. She took back her greenwood sword and stared at the only person left. That person originally thought that 2 cultivators in the same realm as her would be enough to deal with a mere 8th layer aura refining cultivator. He didn't expect that he would be trapped by her in an instant, so he immediately controlled his spirit tool to attack her. This person had sharp eyes. Once he saw Enchanting's technique, he immediately used light body technique to fight her in the air. His figure changed in the air, so he couldn't set up a temporary formation or use the thorns to trap him. He only had to face her bewitching flowers and the greenwood sword. This was also Enchanting's shortcoming in fights of magical powers. By the time she advanced to the foundation-building realm, fights of magical powers between cultivators would take place in the air. Thorns and the like would no longer be of any use, and greenwood art could only stimulate plants that grew for a short period of time. Those things basically had no effect on foundation-building cultivators. The person in front of her was flying in the air using the light body technique, which made her verdant with incantation useless. For a moment, the situation was deadlocked. Enchanting took a look at the spirit-trapping formation and wrinkled her brows. The spirit-trapping formation she laid on the spot could only trap people for a while. It would be terrible if it dragged on. Thinking of this, he took out a talisman from his bosom, intending to end the battle as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the person opposite him let out a cry of surprise and anger. Enchanting turned around and saw she reaching out his hand to catch something. There was only one opponent left. She was overjoyed. Taking advantage of the moment her opponent's mind was shaken, she threw the talisman without hesitation. Amidst the flames created by the talisman, the identity tablet on the person's waist emitted a soft white light. In the white light, the person's body disappeared. The identity tablet dimmed and fell to the ground. Enchanting reached out to catch the identity tablet, then turned around to face the 10th layer cultivator together with Qin. His companions were sent out one after another, so this person was already flustered. Before long, he was also sent out. Qin took the identity tablet. The remaining 2 8th layer cultivators, trapped in the spirit-trapping formation, had just escaped from the formation when they were immediately disrupted by a series of spells. They were defeated without much resistance. The 2 people disappeared, and the 2 identity tablets fell to the ground. Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't have much fighting experience. This time, she was fighting 2 against 5, so she really didn't have the confidence to win. Her mind had been tense the whole time. As soon as the fight ended, she felt weak in the legs. Looking at the 2 identity tablets, Enchanting hesitated. This time, although she was fighting 2 and she was fighting 3, in fact, she dealt with one of them first, which gave her an opportunity to take advantage of. Therefore, these identity tablets couldn't be taken for granted. She also felt unwilling to give up one. She smiled. Junior Marshall Brother Yi, these 2 people were trapped by you, so the identity tablets belong to you. Enchanting couldn't help but feel that she was a bit narrow-minded since he was giving them away. However, she also couldn't learn to refuse, so she immediately took the identity tablets and said earnestly, "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Qin. I will engrave this friendship in my heart." Qin waved his hand and said no more. At this time, footsteps came from outside the room. Enchanting and Qin glanced at each other, feeling depressed. Why did another group come after they killed one group? The next moment, the person who entered the room startled them. It was Louis Dao, senior martial brother Lou. Louis Dao was surprised to see them. Turns out you were ahead of me. Where are junior martial brother Jiang and junior martial brother Su? Have you seen them? Mo Tinga shook her head. No, senior martial brother Lou. What's the situation outside? Lu Yidao said, I've been looking for you since I realized the formation was broken, but I didn't see you for a long time until I came here. The other two senior martial brothers aren't outside? I haven't seen them. Mo Tinga frowned. It seems their situation isn't good. The formation was broken, so they could easily find this place. However, those two people actually hadn't arrived yet. The two of them stared at her in confusion. Mo Tinga took out a summoning jade talisman from her Chinkoan bag and inserted her spiritual aura into it, wanting to send it to Su Jingji. However, the jade talisman didn't respond at all. She sighed and put away the jade talisman. They're not here. They might have been defeated and sent out. Qinshi immediately thought of something. Was it the 5 people just now? It should be. They were also sent here. The two senior martial brothers must have run into them outside and were defeated by them. Louis Dao was confused. What happened? Mo Tinga said, when we arrived here just now, 5 Jin Dao school disciples came in after us. Oh, Louis Dao was surprised. Where are they now? We defeated them and they were sent out. It took Louis Dao a moment to react. He sighed and said, I underestimated the 2 junior martial brothers. 2 against 5, but they actually won. Mo Tinga smiled. They weren't familiar with the characteristics of my spells, so they were caught off guard. Senior martial brother Qin, on the other hand, didn't fall into a disadvantageous position at all and even defeated one of them first. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Qin, she just shook his head and changed the topic. Since senior martial brother Lu is here, let's discuss our next step. We've been here for half a day, so we don't know the situation outside. Lu Yidao said, should we go out? Mo Tinga hesitated. Isn't it too dangerous to go out now? Lu Yidao said, junior martial brother Yi doesn't know, but it'll be more dangerous if we hide here for a while. This time, there are a lot of Zixia sect disciples, and Miwu Valley isn't that big. When they clear out all the people outside and come back to search for us, it'll be very difficult for us to hide. At that time, if we're found, we'll have no way to escape. What he said was very reasonable. The other 2 people pondered for a moment. Then Qin, she said, then let's go out. Since we can't hide, we'll talk after we defeat a few more people. The 2 of them didn't have any objections. Lu Yidao guarded them while they adjusted their breaths and recovered the spiritual aura they consumed in the fight just now. Once their spiritual aura and energy were restored, the 3 of them packed up their things and left the formation. Chapter 50. Now that the formation was broken, the 3 of them walked out and discovered that it was only a very shallow cave. If they really hid inside and didn't come out, they would have been discovered long ago, and they wouldn't be able to escape even if they grew wings. Miwu Valley was indeed worthy of its name. As soon as they came out of the cave, even with their eyesight as cultivators, they could only see things within a few dozen feet. The vast white fog hid everything in front of them. They could only hear shouts and fighting noises coming from the white fog from time to time. Seeing this situation, Mo Tinga took out her greenwood sword and prepared to fight at any time. Lu Yidao frowned. We can only try our luck. Mo Tinga said, the fog is so thick, so it might not be a bad thing for us. If we only have 3 people, I'm afraid we'll be cleared out very soon. In this situation, if we have fewer people, we'll fight. If we have more people, we'll hide and take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Correct. Qin nodded. It'll be easier if we have fewer people in the fog. Having made up their minds, the 3 of them wandered around. Sure enough, from time to time, they came across fights of magical power. If they met other Yunwu sect disciples, they would lend a hand. If they met Jindao school or Zixia sect disciples, they would fight if they had fewer people. If they had more people, they would hide in the fog and use talismans to communicate, Then they would scatter and meet up again. If they ran into a fight between two other groups, they would sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. At a critical moment, they would attack and fish in troubled waters. In the boundless white fog, 7 or 8 Jindao school disciples met 10 or so Zixia sect disciples. As soon as they saw each other, they started fighting. Although Jindao school disciples had fewer people, their cultivation levels were relatively high. Both sides fought back and forth with equal strength. Just when they were both injured and the winner was about to be decided, all of a sudden, densely packed fire thorns grew all around them and surrounded them. Then, big bewitching flowers floated in along with all kinds of magic talismans. Very soon, they, who were already injured and exhausted of their spiritual qi, were cleared out by these magic talismans one by one, and their tokens fell to the ground. The fire thorns retreated, and 3 Yunwu sect cultivators appeared. The leader, a tall and strong man, collected all the identity tablets on ground. The 3 of them then left without stopping, disappearing into the fog. At the end of the first day, when night fell, Imo, Tinga, and the other 2 returned to the location of the formation. Imo, Tinga set up another bewildering formation. The 3 of them hid inside and rested while dividing the loot. Throughout the day, they didn't kill many people head-on, but they did steal quite a lot from the muddy waters. After counting, there were actually more than 100 command tokens. Louis Dao was both startled and delighted. We've really made a profit this time. There are more than 100 identity tablets here. If we divide them, each of us will get about 40 identity tablets. Each identity tablet is worth 10 spirit stones, so each of us will get several hundred spirit stones as a reward. Mo Tinga calculated in her mind. Yunwu sect had a total of 300 to 400 aura refining disciples who were in the 7th layer or above. Jindao school had slightly fewer disciples, but Zixia sect definitely had more than 500 disciples. In other words, Yunwu sect probably had about 800 identity tablets from other sections. Of course, in fact, Zixia sect was a bit stronger. Assuming Yunwu sect had a 50-50 chance of winning against them, including Jindao school, the number of identity tablets they could snatch would only amount to about 400. Moreover, more than half of Jindao school's identity tablets would be snatched by Zixia sect, so the total number of identity tablets they could snatch would be about 300. Right now, they had more than 100 identity tablets in their hands. Even if they divided them into 3 portions, it wouldn't be a problem for them to rank among the top 10 sections. Qin Shi, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was adjusting his breath. Upon hearing Louis Dao's words, he said faintly without even opening his eyes, "Today, there were the most chaotic battles. The weaker ones were all eliminated. I'm afraid we won't have such an advantage tomorrow. We better not take chances." Mo Tinga and Louis Dao became a bit more clear-headed after being splashed with cold water. Louis Dao looked ashamed. He immediately asked, "Junior Martial Brothers, how should we divide these identity tablets?" Qin Shi opened his eyes. He pondered for a moment, then said, "It's all thanks to Junior Martial Brother Ye's special spell that we were able to conveniently take advantage of the situation. Let's give him a bit more." Mo Tinga was dumbfounded. How can I accept this? Even so, it was Louis Dao who took the risk to scout out the enemy's situation. In addition, Qin Shi's exquisite spell made those people think they had a lot of people, so they didn't have the heart to resist. Louis Dao was also open-minded. He admitted that although his cultivation technique was solid, he didn't have any special skills and wasn't as scheming as them, so he didn't argue too much. He said with a smile, "That being the case, Junior Martial Brother Yi will each get 50 identity tablets, and Junior Martial Brother Qin and I will each get 41. What do you think?" Qin Shi nodded. He didn't have any objections. Since they agreed on this, Mo Tinga no longer refused. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although the path to immortality was difficult and cultivators couldn't be considered too noble, not everyone was unscrupulous and only had benefits in their eyes. For example, the people she met, Louis Dao was straightforward, Su Jingji was concerned, and Qin Shi, although cold, was also attentive. She was always on guard against others because of the lessons she learned in her childhood. But now, with these Xiaoyan's identity, she believed they were trustworthy. After putting the 53 identity tablets into her Qinquan bag, she also sat down to adjust her breath. She had finished adjusting his breath, so he stood guard. In fact, it wouldn't have mattered even if no one stood guard. Tinga was confident in formations. This maze was the result of her and second uncle's painstaking efforts. Once an aura-refining disciple entered the formation, it wouldn't be a problem for them to be trapped for several hours. However, this was Miwu Valley after all, so it was better to be careful. All of a sudden, a sound came from inside the formation. It seemed like someone had entered the formation. Tinga opened her eyes and looked at them. Each of them took out their spirit tools or talismans. The footsteps were heavy, staggering, and messy. Apparently, there wasn't just one person. Senior Marshal Sister Shun, how are you? It was a woman's voice. It was crisp, hoarse, and full of anxiety. Tinga frowned slightly. This voice was somewhat familiar. After a while, she heard the voice again. I'm fine. I can still hold on. Junior Marshal Sister Wong, how about your injuries? I'm fine, but my spiritual aura is almost exhausted. The two of them were silent for a while before they heard Junior Marshal Sister Wong say, I don't know what this place is. There's unexpectedly no fog, so I don't know if it's safe or not. Senior Marshal Sister Shun said, it might be the location of an immortal's cave left behind by our predecessors. It's just that we don't know if we found it or not. We'd better look around. Tinga drew her sword. Now that she had determined their position, she slowly entered the formation. Once she reached that position, she cautiously turned around a corner. All of a sudden, she was met with a spell and several pieces of wood were thrown at her. She dodged to the side and was about to brandish her green wood sword when she heard that person's surprised voice. Junior Marshal Brother Yi? Is that Junior Marshal Brother Yi? Tinga was stunned. The two disheveled women in front of her seemed familiar when she looked at them carefully. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'm Wang Qianni. Tinga was gobsmacked. Senior Marshal Sister Wong. Wasn't this the Senior Marshal Sister Wong she met every day when she was collecting heavenly dew? She looked at the other woman. Although her hair was messy, it still couldn't hide her beauty. She looked very familiar. Tinga hesitated, but she vaguely recognized her. This is Senior Marshal Sister Shinbing? Chapter 51. A group of 5 people settled down in the stone room. She went outside to keep watch while Lu Yidao found a corner to regulate his breath. Tinga stared thoughtfully at the entrance of the cave. In a place like Miwu Valley, people had to worry about sneak attacks from time to time. This Senior Marshal Brother Qin really made things convenient for others. She turned around and saw that the 2 senior sisters had already packed up, so she walked over. Senior sisters, how are you? As soon as Wang Qian saw her coming over, she made way for her seat. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please sit. Tinga didn't stand on ceremony and sat across from them. At this moment, Shun Bing opened her eyes, and her aura had already calmed down a lot. This time, I have to thank Junior Marshal Brother Yi. If we hadn't coincidentally met you, I'm afraid that Junior Marshal Sister Wong and I would have been found and kicked out by them tonight. Tinga smiled and waved her hand. Senior Marshal Sister, you don't have to be so polite. We're from the same sect, so we should help each other after entering Miwu Valley. Besides, one more person means one more strength. She paused for a moment, then asked, so you 2 senior sisters are familiar with each other? What a coincidence. Wang Qianni smiled and said, there aren't many female disciples in our sect, so we know most of them. Besides, Senior Apprentice Sister Shun isn't an ordinary disciple. How many people in the sect don't know her? Oh, that was true. Among the more than 1,000 aura-refining disciples in the school, only about 30% of them were female, and most of them came from cultivation clans. Women in the secular world rarely embarked on the path of cultivation. Like her, she was fated to become an immortal because of her ancestors. However, when she saw Shan Bing, she thought of someone Senior Sister Shun. Isn't Senior Sister Moron with you? Hearing this, Shun Bing revealed a bitter smile and said, they were originally in the same place, but you also know that the girl is usually very lazy, and her magic is sloppy, so she has already been kicked out. This result wasn't strange to Imo Tinga. Although Senior Martial Sister Moron's cultivation level wasn't bad, it was all because she ate medicinal pills. She didn't have much ability in fights of magical powers. She usually either ate or played, so it would be strange if she could hold on. Wang Chinny sneered. If she hadn't met those people, Junior Martial Sister Moron might have been able to hold on. Humph, that group of scum. I'll deal with them one day. Her tone of gnashing her teeth made it seem like she had a life and death grudge. Shinbing's expression also became serious. Junior Martial Sister Wang, don't say these words out loud. Just keep in your heart. One day, when we reach the foundation establishment stage, those people won't be a problem. Right now, we don't need to worry about them. Mo Tienga was bewildered. Senior Martial Sister, what kind of person are you talking about? Wang Chinny answered, he's the scum of Zixia sect. When they saw that we were all women, they took liberties with us. Because Junior Martial Sister Moron was too impulsive, she didn't notice and was kicked out. In the end, only the two of us were left. Senior Sister, don't worry. I will remember this grudge, and sooner or later, I will deal with them. The last sentence was said to Shinbing. Seeing that she was so reasonable, Shinbing nodded in relief and continued to meditate to heal her injuries. Mo Tinga then asked Wang Chinny about the general situation. As it turned out, their cultivation levels weren't bad at all. Shinbing and Wang Chinny were both in the 10th layer, Murong Yin was in the 8th layer, and there were 2 other female disciples in the 9th layer. However, because they were female disciples, their strength in fights of magical power was a bit weaker. Although Mo Tinga was also a woman, to be honest, in the cultivation world, female cultivators were not only few in number, but their cultivation levels were also a bit lower. Even if their cultivation levels were the same, they generally weren't as good at fights of magical power as male cultivators. There were many reasons for this situation. Among them, it was the influence of the secular world where men were superior to women, as well as the nature of women themselves. The difference between men and women wasn't only in terms of appearance, but also in terms of temperament and habits. Women were more emotional, sentimental, and more likely to indulge in worldly emotions than male disciples. Men, on the other hand, were naturally more aggressive. Compared to female cultivators, they were more willing to spend a lot of time on spells, so it was natural for them to have a higher cultivation level. It wasn't long after such a small group of female cultivators entered Miwu Valley, they were discovered by a Zixia sect disciple, and the two groups ran into each other. That Zixia sect disciple saw that most of them were good-looking, so he took liberties with them with dirty words. With Murong Yan's temperament, how could she endure it? She impulsively wanted to make a move, but the other party was deliberately provoking them so they could find an opportunity to defeat them one by one. Just like that, Murong Yan was kicked out. Soon after, the 2 9th-layer aura refining female disciples also couldn't resist. Only Shun Bing and Wang Chinny, who had good escaping techniques, managed to escape to this place and run into them. Mo Tinga also said with a stern expression, Senior Martial Sister Wang, although you already understand, Junior Martial Brother will say it again. I hope you won't take offense. Today's situation was chaotic, so we were able to smoothly escape with our lives. Tomorrow, I hope Senior Martial Sisters can restrain themselves. Our strength isn't good enough, and we don't have as many people as Zixia sect. If we can't control ourselves, we'll bring misfortune to others. They didn't have many interactions with female disciples, so they wanted Mo Chinga to tell them that if they wanted to stay with them, they mustn't implicate everyone. Shun Bing and Wang Chinny's cultivation levels were relatively high, so they understood this reasoning. Although Mo Tinga's words didn't make them feel comfortable, they were also reasonable, so they both nodded and didn't express any different opinions. Mo Tinga didn't say anything more and said, Senior Martial Sisters, rest assured and rest. My disorienting formation won't have any problems blocking people. Besides, Senior Marshal Brother Chin will be guarding outside. You two should rest well and recover your strength as soon as possible. After exiting the formation, she saw Chin. She's sitting on the ground on the edge of the cave. His expression was indifferent. The sword with an astonishing momentum rested on his knees. He sensed her presence, but he didn't put it away. Tinga walked towards him, picked a place at random, brushed her sleeves, and sat on the ground like him. Senior Marshal Brother, what are you thinking about? After a long time, she finally put the sword into his chinkoan bag and said, nothing. Tinga tilted her head and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. I heard Senior Marshal Brother Chin was originally a member of a cultivation clan. How did you end up like us and become an individual cultivator? She suddenly glanced at her. His gaze was piercing, but after a while, he shifted his gaze. His tone was still flat. Junior Marshal Brother, you should be very clear about this. Many small cultivation clans can't survive. With only a few cultivators left, they have no choice but to become individual cultivators. I think Junior Marshal Brother Yi has a deeper understanding of the rise and fall of clans than I do. Tinga paused. She knew her probing was too obvious, so his words were a bit prickly. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed, so she smiled and said, Senior Marshal Brother Chin is usually a man of few words, so I'm very curious. She raised the corners of his mouth as if he was smiling. He said, I'm also very curious about Junior Marshal Brother Yi. We usually talk and laugh together, but in fact, we don't seem to have much contact. The smile on Tinga's face froze. Did he mean Chin? She changed the meaning of his words. We've always gotten along well, so I think Junior Marshal Brother Yi is just curious. However, I think it's fine to guess some things in private. There's no need to know everything clearly. Tinga didn't say anything. How could she not understand his obvious meaning? What he meant was that everyone had their own secrets, so there was no need to expose them. Originally, she was just curious, so she probed him a bit. She didn't expect this Senior Marshal Brother Chin to be so open about it. Thinking of her own secret, her expression changed slightly. She calmly observed she for a while. She only relaxed a little when she felt she wasn't keeping a distance from her or deliberately getting close to her. It seemed her disguise was quite successful in this aspect. Even though she felt she had a secret, he couldn't figure out what it was. She tacitly agreed with his proposal and changed the topic. Senior Marshal Brother Chin, what do you think about the matter with the two Senior Marshal sisters? She said, since I don't oppose them staying, it naturally doesn't matter. Senior Marshal Brother Chin, aren't you afraid of being implicated? She shook his head and smiled. Junior Marshal Brother, do you want to fight for that reward? Of course. If they persisted until the end, they would get 2 bottles of ore-converging pills and 100 spirit stones. If the number of identity tokens they won reached the top 3 in the school, they would get 500 spirit stones and a bottle of ore-converging pills. If the reward for each identity token was included, they would get several hundred spirit stones. Altogether, they would get more than 1,000 spirit stones, enough for her to enter closed-door meditation until the school's minor competition. She said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, aren't you afraid of attracting too much attention if the reward is too high? Tinga was stunned. I have a suggestion. We have a lot of identity tokens in our hands, enough to get a lot of spirit stones. In addition to the reward for the top 3 in the school, we don't have to persist until the end tomorrow or the day after. It's best if we can be kicked out. That way, even if we get the top 3, we won't attract too much attention. Tinga was stunned. She looked at her with a faint smile. Could it be that Junior Marshal Brother Yi hopes to show off your strength so that you can be accepted as a disciple by one of the school's elders and become an elite disciple? His words were obviously meant to provoke her. Tinga's expression turned cold. I don't hope to become an elite disciple, but I also can't do anything that would drag my fellow disciples down. She was stunned, but he soon laughed loudly. His laughter was carefree, like she'd never seen before. Once he finished laughing, she looked at her and said in a much gentler voice, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please don't misunderstand. To be honest, although those two junior martial sisters only suffered minor injuries, they're of no help to our group. I don't think they thought they'd be able to persist until the end. As for senior martial brother Liu, I'll use the identity token in my hand to compensate him. This, Mo Tiango was shocked. What's this senior martial brother Qin's purpose? He's actually willing to give up the spirit stones in his hands just to not attract attention. Chapter 52. Early the next morning, the five of them left the stone room. Wang Qianyi and Shun Bing were only lightly injured, which was why they could stay in Miwu Valley. After resting for a night, they were no longer in danger. After some discussion, the five of them agreed to travel together. If they got separated, they would use talismans to communicate. In addition, Qin Shi coldly told the two of them that if they got kicked out due to their lack of strength, they shouldn't complain to them. His words and actions were very different from last night. Mo Tiango felt that he had an ulterior motive. She didn't know where he came from, so it would be better for her to avoid contact with him in the future. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if she was implicated if something went wrong. Wang Qianyi and Shun Bing could only smile bitterly and nod. They were experienced aura-refining disciples in the sect, so they knew what was good for them. Qin Shi's willingness to travel together with them was already good enough. Besides, Mo Tiango already told them last night that since they were going to travel with them, they should listen to their commands. Since they were mentally prepared, Qin Shi's words weren't that harsh anymore. Today was indeed different from yesterday. They walked around the valley for a while, but didn't encounter anyone else. Presumably, most of the people were already kicked out yesterday. Liu Dao continued to inquire about the situation. He had an unconventional cultivation technique that was good at hiding one's breath and strengthening one's divine sense, so he was the best candidate. Today, they rarely encountered a small group of people. If it wasn't a group of 7 or 8 to more than 10 people, it would be 1 or 2 people who were alone. Presumably, after yesterday's events, it was either because they were strong or because they had gathered a lot of people that they could stay until now. They killed most of the people who were alone. Some of them were said to be famous and powerful aura-refining disciples. Wang Qianyi and Shun Bing recognized them, so they thought about it and decided not to act. In any case, they had enough identity tablets in their hands, so there was no need to take risks. The opportunity to fish in troubled waters was gone because there weren't many people left. Most of them were gathered in one place, so it was very difficult to act. At noon, they rested for a while. Liu Dao came back from scouting and told them that there were 2 groups fighting not far away from them. They belonged to Yunwu sect and Zixia sect, respectively. Yunwu sect only had 1 person, while Zixia sect had 6 people. After a while, the 5 of them decided to go and investigate. Since this person could fight 6 people on his own, his strength must be outstanding. If the 5 of them went, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. After flying for a short while, he heard the sounds of fighting. Weapons clashed, and spells collided. It was quite intense. Amidst the flying dust, they approached the scene of the fight. From a distance, they could see the sorry figure of that Yunwu sect disciple. Senior brother Zhou. Liu Dao was shocked when he saw that person's face. This person was actually their managing disciple, senior martial brother Zhou. Mo Tiango swept her gaze over the area opposite senior martial brother Zhou. Liu Dao said there were 6 people when he came back from scouting, but there were only 5 left in front of her. Could it be that senior martial brother Zhou killed one of them? Those who could manage disciples were all elites among aura-refining disciples. It was no wonder that this senior martial brother Zhou could persevere for so long under the hands of 6 aura-refining disciples. Among these Zixia sect disciples, 3 of them were in the 8th layer. They were really daring. Elite disciples could easily deal with several ordinary disciples, but senior martial brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura-refining realm. Obviously, he wasn't an ordinary disciple. However, these people's efforts were not in vain. With so many people taking turns, senior brother Zhou's spiritual qi was obviously running out. As long as they persisted, they could still win. The 5 people who came with them each took out their spirit tools. Qin's spell had already been cast, forcing those Zixia sect disciples to retreat several steps. Upon seeing them, she was startled. It was obvious that they were also struggling and didn't notice that someone was approaching. Senior Martial Brother Zhou was overjoyed and shouted, "Junior Martial Brothers and Sisters, they can't hold on any longer. Quickly attack." Mo Tiange and the others didn't hesitate and used their spirit tools and talismans to attack. Their cultivation levels were obviously much higher than their opponents, so it didn't take them long to completely wipe out these Zixia sect disciples. Senior Martial Brother Zhou. After escaping from the bitter battle, Senior Martial Brother Zhou wiped the sweat on his forehead and looked at them. Junior Martial Brothers. He recognized the disciples who lived with him, but he wasn't close to them and wasn't familiar with them, so he couldn't call out their names. His gaze shifted to Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi, and he was surprised. Junior Martial Sister Shen, Junior Martial Sister Wang, how come you're also here? Shen Bing smiled bitterly and said, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, we're all from the same sect. We were kicked out, so we got together. She then asked him, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, aren't you with Senior Martial Brother Li and Senior Martial Brother Qi? How come? This time, it was Senior Martial Brother Zhou's turn to smile bitterly and said, to tell you the truth, we underestimated our enemies too much. Last night, when we were resting, we were ambushed. 2 of us went out, and the other 2 got separated. Later on, we couldn't find them. Since Senior Martial Brother Zhou was an elite disciple, naturally, those who were with him were not ordinary disciples. They were all outstanding. No wonder he said that they underestimated their enemies. Mo Tiange couldn't help but lament her good luck. A group like Senior Martial Brother Zhou's actually met such a fate so early. If it wasn't because she happened to be with Qin Shi and Lu Yidao, she'd probably be outside now. It was precisely because Lu Yidao's divine sense was powerful, Qin Shi's magic was outstanding, and they were exceptionally careful that they were able to avoid powerful enemies and obtain so many identity tablets. After that, the group fell into silence. Apart from Mo Tiange, all 5 of them were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, so their strength wasn't weak. Senior Martial Brother Zhou naturally wanted to be with them, but he was just a disciple in charge, so he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Wang and Shen, who joined later, wanted to say something, but they didn't know whether they were willing or not, so they could only look at them tentatively. As for Mo Tiange, she was actually worried about Senior Martial Brother Zhou. It wouldn't be good for them to deliberately lose. After talking with Qin Shi yesterday, she already agreed to his proposal. Indeed, she couldn't attract attention. If she persisted until the end with her cultivation level in the 8th layer, she would definitely attract other people's attention. There were 3 core formation cultivators outside Miwu Valley, and it was said that the sect head would personally reward them. Even if she had the spirit-concealing jade pendant to conceal herself, she still didn't want to take this risk. Besides, even if she didn't obtain the final reward, she still had about 50 identity tablets in her hands, which could be exchanged for more than 500 spirit stones. Qin Shi was also willing to make up for it, so she could obtain the top 3 rewards. That way, she would still have 500 spirit stones and a bottle of aura-converging pills. Based on this calculation, she could obtain more than 1,000 spirit stones and a bottle of aura-converging pills. Coupled with the bottle of aura-converging pills in her hands, it would be enough for her to enter closed-door meditation until she reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm. After waiting for Senior Martial Brother Zhou to recover his spiritual aura under their protection, Qin Shi said, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, since we're fated to meet, we might as well go together. I wonder if it's convenient for Senior Martial Brother Zhou? Zhou, Wang, and Shen were obviously relieved. Senior Martial Brother Zhou readily agreed. Thank you, Junior Martial Brothers and Sisters. I'd be happy to go with you. Qin Shi smiled. In that case, what do you think we should do now, Senior Martial Brother Zhou? Senior Martial Brother Zhou said modestly, I'm basking in your light. You must have already cooperated with me. so I'll cooperate with you. Qin, she nodded, then said to Lu Yidao, Senior Marshal Brother Lu, in any case, it'll be very difficult for us to run into other people today. It'd be better for us to just wait here. We'll be able to wait at ease while we're exhausted. It'll be a bit more relaxing. Lu Yidao nodded without any objections. Since yesterday, he was already very accustomed to Qin, she coming up with ideas. Ever since Qin, she entered Miwu Valley, he was practically like a fish in water. It seemed like his experience in fights of magical powers was much richer than theirs. Thinking up to this point, Emo Tinga once again pondered this person's origins. Chapter 53. Someone's coming. Lu Yidao, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. Emo Tinga immediately stood up and held her greenwood sword in her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou stared at her and said, There are about 10 people. 10 people. It seemed difficult to deal with them. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou once said that after wandering in Miwu Valley for a day, he rarely saw any disciples of Zixia sect. Jindao School had already been cleared out long ago, and Zixia sect had the most disciples. Zixia sect disciples were most likely the ones who came. In the fog, those people finally appeared in front of them. Wang Qinny cried out in alarm with an angry expression on her face. Junior Marshal Sister Wang, what's wrong? Wang Qinny said angrily. The people who spoke rudely to us are among them. Since they were together, they had already talked about their experiences. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou frowned. At this moment, those people were already in front of them. 5 were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, 3 were in the 9th layer, and 2 were in the 8th layer. It seemed the 7th layer aura refining disciples had been cleared out long ago. Most of the remaining people were in the 10th layer. Emo Tinga pondered in her heart. The other side had 10 people while we had 6. Although we were at a disadvantage in numbers, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Even if he was slightly injured, his strength couldn't be underestimated. Their odds of winning were still quite high. Oh, a rascally-looking young man stared at Wang Qinny and Shen Bing and said with a smile, Ladies, it turns out you're here. We've been looking for you for a long time. Why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that you're not satisfied with us? Wang Qinny's face was completely red, and Shen Bing's eyebrows were already furrowed. Both of them were frowning and didn't say a word. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou looked at them and coldly stared at the person in front of him. Junior Marshal Brother from Zixia sect, please conduct yourself with dignity. That person glanced at them and was about to ridicule them when he realized that Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. He immediately swallowed his words, but he also didn't want to admit defeat, so he said with a smile, Senior Marshal Brother, I was just joking. You don't have to be so serious, right? Emo Tinga snorted and said, I wonder if these Senior Marshal brothers usually joke like this with their fellow Marshal sisters? That's really unusual. Our Yunwu sect's Marshal brothers always treat our fellow Marshal sisters with great respect and would never casually joke with them. These words caused the young man's face to stiffen, instantly turning the color of a pig's liver. Someone in the team immediately snorted and said, Why are you talking to them? Let's end this as soon as possible. We can still rest for a while today. Only then did the young man's expression soften. With a snort, he summoned his spirit tool. The next day, everyone was already tired of greeting each other. Almost as soon as they saw each other, they would fight. This time, the young man spoke a few words of nonsense, and the two sides were already fighting without saying a word. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was surrounded by 3 people, while the remaining few charged towards Shen Bing and Wang Qinny. Both of them were lightly injured, and each of them had a fight 1 against 2, which put them in a dangerous situation. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was entangled by those 3 people. Seeing that the 2 of them were struggling, he shouted, Junior Marshal sisters, come over here. Junior Marshal brothers, go help them if you can. Upon hearing this, Lu Yidao forced his opponent to retreat a few steps before approaching Wang and Shen. While retreating, Qin, she said to Emo Tinga, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, entangle them. Mo Tinga nodded and threw the remaining fire brambles at them. The seeds filled the sky and pierced the ground, causing thorns to grow and entangle the three opponents. Bewitching flowers were also thrown at them, finally trapping those people and rendering them powerless to fight back. Seeing this scene, senior martial brother Zhou looked at her in surprise. Among so many people, she was the only one in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Senior martial brother Zhou thought she was just lucky, but he didn't expect her to also be extraordinary. If an aura refining cultivator didn't prepare in advance, it would be very difficult to avoid this trapping technique. It was no wonder she could hold on until now. Mo Tinga cautiously walked between the three people. She wasn't senior martial brother Zhou, who had to rely on trapping techniques to fight 1 against 3. She could only hope that they could quickly deal with the others so they could free up their hands to help. Seeing this situation, one of the people in the team with a higher cultivation level shouted loudly, "Fly up." This reminder made her opponent struggle to fly up using the light body technique. Mo Tinga's expression changed. Sure enough, her opponent wasn't simple. He could think of a way to break this technique so quickly. The seeds in her hands were almost used up, so she could only clench her teeth and persevere. All of a sudden, Qin Shi's low voice entered her ears. "Don't persist. Take this opportunity to perish together with them." Mo Tinga was startled, but she suddenly understood. Taking this opportunity to escape was the best. Not only was it honorable, but it also wouldn't implicate senior martial brother Liu. In a split second, she made a decision. She took out several spirit stones from her robe, and with a flick of her sleeve, she laid them down without anyone noticing. Under the joint attack of the three people, her complexion turned pale, and she kept retreating. Seeing this, the other party was overjoyed, and the three of them attacked her together. Just when Mo Tinga couldn't hold on any longer, Qin Shi shouted, "Junior martial brother Yi." Right at that moment, the scenery around her suddenly changed. Mo Tinga drew her sword and pointed it downwards. Suddenly, sand and stones flew everywhere. In the dense fog, several rays of light burst out at the same time. Liu Yidao didn't have enough time to save her. He could only watch helplessly as they disappeared into the flying sand, and several identity tablets fell to the ground. The scenery in front of her changed. Mo Tinga looked around and found herself at the top of a mountain. Qin Shi and several others were standing beside her. The top of the mountain was densely packed with disciples from the three cultivation groups. Their appearance caused a commotion. The three Zixia sect disciples fiercely glared at them, then walked towards the place where Zixia sect disciples were gathered. "Junior martial brother Yi, senior martial brother Qin," someone called out in front of her. Mo Tinga turned around and saw that it was Su Jingji. He hastily pulled the two of them away, found a corner, and sat down. He then asked with concern, "How are you guys?" Mo Tinga smiled and said, "We're fine. We got some identity tablets, but we really can't hold on anymore today." "Senior martial brother Su, how about you?" Su Jingji sighed. "Don't mention it. It's our bad luck. Not long after we split up, we ran into 5 Jindao school disciples who were also teleported there. We didn't have time to inform you guys before we were teleported out." Sure enough, it was just as she guessed. Mo Tinga comforted him. "So that's how it is. It's really bad luck. It's not your fault." Qin Shi nodded and asked, "Where's senior martial brother Jiang?" Su Jingji said, "Senior martial brother Jiang doesn't look well. He probably prepared very carefully and found it hard to accept. We separated right after we came out, so I don't know where he is now." He then asked excitedly, "How's your harvest? You only came out today, so it should be pretty good, right?" Mo Tinga smiled and said, "We're just fishing in troubled waters, so it's not bad." Su Jingji's face was filled with envy when he heard what she said. He said, "It's good that you got something." Unlike us, who prepared for so long, alas, the three of them chatted for a while. Several people appeared from the transporting formation. They were the people who fought with them, but Liu Yidao and senior martial brother Zhou were nowhere to be seen. Mo Tinga and Qin Shi exchanged glances. They understood that senior martial brother Zhou and the others had finally made it through. Chapter 54. On the third day, few people came out of the transporting formation. Like the other disciples, Tinga meditated on the mountaintop. Although the spiritual aura on the mountaintop couldn't compare to the spiritual aura in the north peak of Mount Yunwu, it wasn't much worse than the spiritual aura in the south peak. Most cultivators cultivated in a race against time and didn't waste any time. Even the sect heads of the 3 cultivation groups and the foundation-building cultivators who came with them didn't waste any time meditating. During this time, Tinga had already stabilized her cultivation realm. Moreover, after several fights of magical power, she also gained some new insights into the use of spiritual aura, so she had to carefully study them. Some things had to be understood in fights of magical power. Listening to lectures wasn't enough. Time passed bit by bit. On the morning of the 4th day, the 3 sect heads and the seniors who were meditating opened their eyes one after another. Sect head Li of Zixia sect said, "Time's up." Sect head Fong of Yunwu sect and sect head Jin of Jindao school nodded solemnly. Soon after, the 3 of them stood up and stood in 3 different directions around the transporting formation. Then they circulated their spiritual aura together and launched a joint attack. An unbearable power spread out, and disciples of the 3 cultivation groups appeared around the transporting formation one after another. The 3 sect heads worked together again, and the transporting formation instantly disappeared from the mountaintop. Tinga looked around. There were only 50 to 60 people in total, most of whom were Zixia sect disciples. There was no one from Jindao school, and there were more than 10 people from Yunwu sect, including senior martial brother Zhou's group of 4. Sect head Fong's and sect head Jin's expressions changed, especially sect head Jin, whose face was so dark that ink could drip from it. Tinga also frowned. Zixia sect's strength seemed to be beyond her imagination. This was only a corner of the eastern side of Kunwa Mountain Range. There were no big cultivation groups here, only these 3 medium-sized cultivation groups. They kept each other in check and united against external forces. If one of them was too strong, it wouldn't be a good thing. The balance would probably be broken. Sect head Li of Zixia sect remained calm and collected. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, we should count the results." Sect head Jin's face was still dark. Sect head Fong finally restrained his emotions and said, as brotherly said. Then he walked to Yunwu's sect's side and shouted, "Disciples, hand over all the identity tablets you got. No tricks." After sect leader Fong said that, the foundation-building cultivator who was waiting at the side raised his voice and said, "Hand over your identity tokens one by one. Don't push and shove." Junior martial brother Yi, "Let's go." Qin Shi, who was sitting on the side, turned around and said. Tinga nodded, then stood up and dusted off her sleeves. She then followed the flow of people and walked to the side to line up. There weren't too many people who managed to get their identity tablets. The aura-refining disciples, sitting on the ground with disappointed expressions on their faces, were all cleared at once. There were only about 100 people in the queue. Soon, it was Tinga's turn. When the foundation-building cultivator took the bag from her, a strange expression flashed across his face. When he finished counting the number inside the bag, he looked at her cautiously and recorded, "Yi Xiaotian, a total of 84 identity tablets." Tinga saluted him, then retreated. Qin Shi, a total of 22 identity tablets. Upon hearing this, Tinga paused for a moment. Her heart was filled with complicated feelings. Qin Shi gave her about 20 identity tablets. Not to mention the possibility of getting into the top 3, the identity tablets alone were worth 200 spirit stones. If it wasn't because she was in urgent need of spirit stones, she really wouldn't want to accept this favor. After all, a debt of gratitude was the hardest to repay. When they returned to their original spot, Su Jingji's expression was filled with envy. "Junior martial brother Yi, I really didn't expect you to get into the top 3 now." When he heard the record just now, he was shocked. He never expected there would be so many. This was a huge amount of money. Qin Shi, who came back later, said, I'll be honest with you, Junior Marshall Brother Sue. In fact, in order to get that reward, the two of us gathered our identity tablets in one place. This way, splitting the reward equally is better than neither of us getting anything at all. Su Jingji suddenly understood. I see. But the two of you are still very amazing. You actually managed to get more than 100 identity tablets. Mo Tinga said, it's all because Senior Marshall Brother Lu was there that we could fish in troubled waters. Otherwise, if we were alone, we might have already been surrounded and forced out. Su Jingji nodded. You're right. Senior Marshall Brother Lu's cultivation technique is indeed very suitable for fights of magical powers in Miwu Valley. After successfully diverting Su Jingji's attention, the two of them smiled at each other. They were very good at fooling people. By the way, what about Senior Marshall Brother Lu? He made a huge profit this time. He persevered until the end, so he got 2 bottles of aura-converging pills, in addition to the reward in his hand. Alas, he'll get a lot of spirit stones, even if he sells them. Su Jingji became even more envious when he thought of the luckiest Lu Yidao. Lu Yidao's straightforward laughter came from behind them. Junior Marshall Brothers, I'm really indebted to you. The three of them turned around and saw Lu Yidao walking towards them happily despite being exhausted. One after another, they called out, Senior Marshall Brother Lu. After greeting them, Lu Yidao first thanked Mo Tinga and Qin Shi. I still haven't thanked Junior Marshall Brothers. If it weren't for you risking your lives to get rid of those people, we probably wouldn't have been able to persevere. Mo Tinga smiled. Senior Marshall Brother Lu, what are you talking about? It was just a matter of convenience. At that time, I indeed couldn't persevere any longer. In fact, I've implicated Senior Marshall Brother Qin. Qin, she shook his head. It was just a coincidence. I just want to lend a hand, but unexpectedly, we came out together. Junior Marshall Brother Yi, don't take it to heart. Senior Marshall Brother Lu, don't take it to heart. As they talked about that fight of magical powers, Su Jingji was especially jealous. The three of you really don't give me any face. Let's go back and talk about this slowly. Aren't you trying to provoke me by talking about this in front of me? Lu Yidao burst into laughter and patted Su Jingji's shoulder. Junior Marshall Brother Su, you also have to remember this. Fortunately, it was you and Junior Marshall Brother Jiang who encountered those 5 Jindao school disciples. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble. Su Jingji rolled his eyes. Senior Marshall Brother Lu, you think I haven't been provoked enough? Lu Yidao laughed again. Mo Tinga couldn't help but shake her head with a smile. In fact, she could be considered lucky, right? With Yi Xiaoyan's identity, she made these friends. No matter what would happen in the future, she should cherish today's friendship. When the 3 cultivation groups finished recording, the 3 school heads once again gathered in one place. Jindao School head Jin still didn't look well. Zixia Sec school head Li still had a smile on his face. As for Yunwu Sec's school head Fong, his expression was no longer gloomy. Because according to statistics just now, although Yunwu Sec didn't have many disciples who persisted until the end, the number of identity tablets they obtained was extremely high, so they could finally save their face. The disciples couldn't hear what the 3 school heads were talking about, but they soon dispersed. The school heads called out to the others, and each of them led their disciples away on their flying magic weapons. Several hours later, they returned to Yunwu Sec Square. The school head made a final announcement. Disciples, Yunwu Sec's performance in this Miwu Valley competition is acceptable, but you mustn't be complacent. You have to know that we're still far from being comparable to Zixia Sect, so we must continue to work hard. All right, the competition in Miwu Valley is over. I'll now announce the rewards for the final winners and the top 3 who obtained identity tablets. School head Fong frowned when he saw the names reported by the foundation building disciples, but he didn't say anything. He raised his voice and announced, I'll now announce the names of the final 13 winners. Zhou Jinan, Lu Yidao, Li Rongsheng, Murong Zi, Wang Qianyi, Shunbing. The 3 who obtained the most identity tablets are Zhou Jinan, 92, Yi Xiaotian, 84, Li Rongsheng, 76. I hope the other disciples can follow their example and cultivate diligently to strengthen Yunwu's sect. All right, you've been working hard these past 3 days. Go back and rest. The rewards for the identity tablets will be distributed tomorrow. The disciples who obtain the final winners and the top 3 prizes, please come to the steward's hall to receive them. Mo Tienga heaved a sigh of relief when she heard the definite results. Fortunately, she accepted Qin Shi's identity tablet. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to obtain these rewards. She immediately spoke to Qin Shi and Su Jingji, then went to the steward's hall with Lu Yidao. Lu Yidao patted her shoulder and said with a smile, "You and Junior Marshal Brother Qin are really smart. Obtaining these rewards isn't much worse than obtaining the final victory." Lu Yidao was more than a head taller than her, and he was also very strong. Mo Tienga grimaced in pain from his pat. "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, I'm very thin and weak. Don't use too much strength." Upon seeing her expression, Lu Yidao hastily withdrew his hand. He then said with great puzzlement, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you seem to be 18 years old, right? Why are you still so thin? Your waist is as thin as a girl's." Mo Tienga hastily said, "There's nothing I can do about being small. Maybe I'll grow taller in the future." Thin waist. Then I'll go back and wrap it around my waist a few more times. Chapter 55. After receiving their rewards in the steward's hall, Mo Tienga and Lu Yidao chatted and laughed as they returned to their residence. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou came back earlier than them. At the moment, he was tidying up the spiritual plants he had neglected for several days. When he saw them, he smiled and nodded at them. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou's name was Zhou Jinan. This time, he was the one who won first place. The 2 rewards really made people envious. Because they traveled together in Miwu Valley, he treated them differently from before. Mo Tienga and Lu Yidao hastily returned his greeting, then returned to their rooms. Qin Shi and Su Jingji were still waiting for them in the small hall. Jiang Shanghong's room was filled with spiritual aura, so he must have returned to cultivate. This time, it must have been a big blow to him, but they weren't familiar with him, so there was nothing to say. After chatting for a while, the 4 of them went their separate ways. Mo Tienga hesitated for a moment, but still went to knock on the door next door. The door opened, and Qin Shi stood behind it. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, is there something else?" Mo Tienga looked at his hand, holding the door, and raised her eyebrows. "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, aren't you going to invite me in?" Qin Shi smiled, let go of her hand, and turned around to enter the room. This room was different from the others. She hadn't seen Jiang Shanghong's room, but she had seen Su Jingji and Lu Yidao's. Su Jingji's room was the same as hers. The bedding and praying mats were changed by themselves, and the tea set and so on were all brought from home. As for Lu Yidao, he didn't add many things. Aside from cultivation needs, there was nothing else. The room in front of her was different from theirs. The praying mats weren't things from the school, so she could feel they weren't ordinary. On the table, there was a green jade tea set, sparkling and translucent, containing spiritual aura. Obviously, it wasn't ordinary either. In the middle of the room, there was a cauldron that seemed to be a pil concocting furnace. The room was surrounded by formation tools, praying mats, tea set, pil concocting furnace, and formation. Only these 4 things were added, but none of them were ordinary. She couldn't see through the other 3 things, but she could see some clues about the formation. This was a compound formation that combined defense, spiritual aura gathering, restriction on divine sense, and isolation of spiritual aura. Inside this formation, the density of spiritual aura was comparable to that of the North Peak. She inwardly speculated that based on her and second uncle's attainments and formations, they definitely wouldn't be able to create such a formation. This formation must have been created by a cultivator in the core formation realm or above. If it was put on the market, it would fetch at least several thousand spirit stones. She turned around and saw Qin Shi looking at her with a faint smile on his face. Realizing that she had lost her composure, she said, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, we've received our rewards. Let's split them now." As she spoke, she took out a cloth bag from her chinquin bag and said, "There are 700 spirit stones here. The medallion senior apprentice brother gave me can be exchanged for 200 spirit stones. As for the reward, I urgently need chi gathering pills. Senior apprentice brother's cultivation base is already at the 10th layer, so I don't think you need them that much. So I think the spirit stones are yours, and the chi gathering pills are mine." She only glanced at her and said, "Since I said I'm compensating you, I naturally won't ask you for it. You can use it yourself. Although senior brother doesn't want it, I think it's better for us to be clear about it. After all, I don't want to attract attention. I came out early, but it's not just because of you." She muttered to himself for a moment, then took the cloth bag. He took out a handful of spirit stones and threw the rest back to her. Tinga was puzzled. There are about 200 spirit stones in here. Just take it as returning my identity medallion. As for the reward, you'll have to bear part of the risk when you receive it. I don't want it. Besides, do you think I'm lacking spirit stones? Tinga could only smile bitterly at this question. Looking at the things in this room, this senior apprentice brother Chin probably didn't care about these several hundred spirit stones, so she could only say, "All right, I'll accept senior apprentice brother's kindness today." She nodded, then asked, "Is there anything else, junior apprentice brother?" "No." Tinga paused for a moment, then said helplessly, "Then I'll take my leave." She revealed a faint smile. He was obviously very satisfied with her tactfulness. "Junior apprentice brother Yi, please go ahead." He said please, but in fact, he just wanted to ask her to leave, right? Tinga felt even more helpless, but she also didn't want to stay, so she followed his wishes and pushed the door open to leave. After returning to her room, she first took a bath, then lay on the bed in a daze. This time, she could be said to have gained quite a lot. 1,000 spirit stones, a bottle of aura-converging pills, and the bottle of aura-converging pills she already had were enough for her to cultivate without worrying about spirit stones for the next 2 years, until she reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, when she thought about Qin Shi, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. In fact, she only said a few words to probe him, so she didn't know he had secrets. However, this person didn't seem to be afraid of her knowing he had ulterior motives and seemed certain she wouldn't divulge them. Why was he so sure? As she thought about it, she suddenly felt her hair stand on end. Could it be that her secret was discovered? Was that why he was so sure? Now that she thought about it carefully, this senior apprentice brother Chin did treat her a little differently from other people, but she couldn't tell what exactly was different. She couldn't figure it out no matter how she thought about it. So she shook her head and decided to sleep first. Tomorrow, she would go down the mountain and ask second uncle. Second uncle had a lot of experience, so he would definitely be able to tell her what to do. She closed her eyes and soon fell asleep. However, she kept dreaming today. First, she dreamed of her childhood. Her mother was still in good health and was cooking in the kitchen. She was only 3 or 4 years old, sitting on a small stool and watching. Then she dreamed of Liu Shan. She didn't understand the human furnace when she was young, but now that she knew what it meant, she became even more terrified. Then she dreamed of Yi Jingwen. She and second uncle were taken back to Xianxing school and were at their disposal. Then she dreamed of Yunwu sect. Her secret was exposed, and she was forced to kneel in front of the sect head of True Treasure Hall, waiting to be punished. Tinga woke up with a head full of sweat. She felt weak. It seemed she was really scared yesterday. She patted her forehead and went outside to get some water. After washing herself, she prepared to go down the mountain. She first went to the sect shop to get the spirit stones she used to sell formations and exchanged them for healing medicinal pills before returning to the small courtyard she used to live in with second uncle. She opened the formation and walked into the courtyard. Before she could knock on the door, she heard second uncle's voice. Shouty on. Tinga pushed the door open. Second uncle, it's me. A smile appeared on Yi Zhang's old face, but Tinga was dumbfounded. After not seeing him for a month, second uncle looked even more tired. His face was gray and his hair was white. He looked extremely old. She finally realized that without her knowledge, second uncle had already become like this. With second uncle's cultivation level, Even if he had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm, he could have found a small cultivation group and lived the rest of his life in peace. However, in the past 7 or 8 years, second uncle took her everywhere to avoid Xianxing school, racking his brains to earn spirit stones. In the end, he ended up in a situation where he was seriously injured. Second uncle, tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "Did your injuries worsen? Why didn't you tell me?" Yi Jiang looked at her and smiled. Xiao Tian, Tinga, according to second uncle's estimation, I don't have much time left in my life, so my injuries haven't healed. Although we, cultivators, have a lifespan that surpasses mortals, we still have to die. Don't be sad. This day will come eventually. But Yi Jiang waved his hand to stop her. I can feel that I only have 2 or 3 years at most. Even if my injuries are healed, it won't be enough. Now that you're in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, second uncle hopes to see you advance to the foundation building realm before I pass away. At that time, even if I die, I'll be able to rest in peace. Tears involuntarily fell from her eyes. Upon hearing what he said, she hastily wiped them away, took out her Chinquan bag, poured out spirit stones and medicinal pills, and said with a smile, "Second uncle, look, I want a lot of people in Miwu Valley. These rewards are enough for me to cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm." Yi Jiang smiled. Second uncle always believed you could do it. Don't worry, second uncle will definitely hold on until that time. Therefore, you have to cultivate diligently, understand? And Mo, Tinga nodded, but she felt bitter in her heart. She knew this day would come eventually. Ever since second uncle was injured, he kept reminding her that he didn't have much time left in his life. Cultivators naturally had to be indifferent to life and death. But although she understood this, she couldn't help but feel sad. 10 years ago, it was her mother who abandoned her. Now it was second uncle. The most important people by her side always left her. All right, tell me about your trip to Miwu Valley. Second uncle can give you some pointers. Mo Tinga calmed down and told him everything about Miwu Valley in detail. Finally, she talked about Qinshi. Yi Jiang was silent for a long time before he said, "That person's background must be extraordinary. According to what you said, he's so experienced in fights of magical powers and doesn't lack treasures. He really doesn't seem like an aura refining cultivator. Unless he's not an individual cultivator and has a high-level cultivator as an elder, or he had other fortuitous encounters, you don't have to worry. He obviously doesn't have any ulterior motives toward you for what he did. You just need to reduce your contact with him in the future." Mo Tinga felt a bit relieved. "I understand. I won't care about what he does. We'll just continue our relationship like before." "Correct. You should go back and continue cultivating. Second uncle doesn't have much time, so you have to hurry." Mo Tinga was silent. In the end, she listened to him and said, "I understand, second uncle. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.